pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to move the agenda around a little so we can spend more time on our main topic. So we have an outdoor assembly permit application for White Oak Farm, Christian Clark. He really doesn't need the permit, but it's a charitable event, so he wants it for the music exemption, I guess, the sound exemption. It's for 10/22 from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's a fundraiser for Strong Point Vinet Ranch. Kids will have you-pick pumpkin patch and pumpkin decorating, craft vendor tables, live music, food trucks, and wine and beer tastings. So it's a week from this Saturday, I guess. Okay, any questions on this one?
He provided a map. He has parking
Yep.
over at White Oak on the property.
Yep. He has bathrooms.
His bathroom.
He has,
Oh, okay.
okay,
It's the Saturday.
approximately 75 to 100 people. Okay, all right, we're good with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to our main topic of discussion today. Oh, you're done.
Yeah, you're done. Good to go. Thanks,
Thank you.
Christian.
At our last town board meeting, the Friends of Cockles Harbor made a presentation along with Christopher Goldberg from Stony Brook regarding comments and considerations regarding the proposed Shelter Island Center municipal wastewater treatment system. We gave Mr. Goldberg a little bit of time at that meeting, but invited him to come today to make his presentation. So what we're going to do is we have the actual presentation on paper that was presented to us. It's been on the town website since we got it. I asked P.O. Lombardo, who is our consultant on this project, specifically to address the concerns, and then we'll give it over to Dr. Goldberg to continue the discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Supervisor. For the record, my name is P.O. Lombardo Associates. We are the Town of Shelter Island's engineer of record for the wastewater project. And that's been underway for, I guess it's well over 12 plus months. And the documents are all have been in the public domain. So what I've done and what I'm going to be presented, it's all in writing. And I have submitted that to the town through the town's engineer. And my understanding is that it will be posted on the town's website as well. So, and what I did in the document was I basically took the report submitted by Mr. Gobler and wherever comments were made that, as I say in my cover letter, were comments that have been made that, in my opinion, are incorrect, unsubstantiated, and or misleading, we have provided a response. So I should preface some of this by saying that Lombardo Associates, we've been doing wastewater management for unsewered communities now for 50 years. Our specialty has been working with unsewered communities, and our specialty is even identifying and developing and implementing non-sewer alternatives. So we're pretty well known nationally in that regard, and we enjoy coming up with non-sewering solutions that get the job done at a lower cost when it's possible, and it's not always possible. So the challenge usually for communities is what's the optimal mixture of the solutions that are out there, because it's not one size fits all. So in any event, and the basis of the engineering decisions, and some of which the town board was actively involved with, it's all well documented in the report. So I'll just go through these things item one by one, if you will. In the executive summary, I'm going to paraphrase what Mr. Gobler states. He's alleging that that the cost may be too low because of, quote, inflation and, quote, the addition of treatment for emerging contaminants. So our response is the cost estimates include very high estimates for sewer costs, as well as they include 8% for miscellaneous and 15% for contingency, which is sort of typical allowances for unknowns and, quote, inflation being one of them, that are built into, these are planning costs. Although future market conditions that will actually influence the project costs are extremely difficult or impossible to predict, otherwise we'd be in the financing business. It is Lombardo Associates' professional opinion that based upon our experience with contractors that have frankly been holding their prices over the last year, as well as the unobligated funds that exist in the budget, that the budgets are, quote, reasonable for now. And it's noted that the budgets are planning level budgets and that the construction costs will be updated, or the estimated construction costs will be updated based upon actual designs, as many design details affect project costs significantly greater than inflation. And who knows what inflation or what the economy is going to be next year. So, and then the question on the allegation is that there's insufficient budget for emerging contaminants. In our opinion, the required budget is low. We don't need a lot of money to deal with the emerging contaminants. This speaks to some of the other comments. Our current opinion on dealing with the emergent contaminant treatment, first of all, it's not required. We propose it to, raise the bar, if you will, in terms of the sensitivity, the groundwater is your water supply, it's critical. So, however, the field of treatment for emergent contaminants is rapidly evolving. And this project is going to be on the low end flow of it. And so we are deferring any decision on which technology, and I'm going to say even if any at this point, until the design step, because, and we have, as a backdrop, there's always the low cost, capital cost of activated carbon that can be used. That's sort of our fallback. We'd like to use some others, but it's going to turn into a cost effectiveness analysis where we get into design. The next comment was relative to alternative approaches using individual on-site systems and even an implementation of urine diversion as a option. The project examined alternatives extensively and considered all options, and I've been a big fan of urine diversion for well over 25 years. But there's issues with it. It doesn't happen easily. As well as this board deliberated on this whole question of whether we use IA technologies in the town center here, and by one of the techniques, and board member Infola even was the one that brought this up. I remember the discussion and the whole question of relocating the wells so that we wouldn't have the the well setback issues to deal with. So after the deliberations, the board, let me say, rejected that option as the preferred technique. So it was seriously debated and considered. Okay, then in the report, in our response, we provide a table that shows the difference of the additional nitrogen removal that occurs with the proposed system as even compared to IA technologies. IA technologies generally have an effluent for single family houses. They generally have a max, the lowest they go, round numbers, is only 12 parts per million milligrams per liter, as others have documented. And we question, there's not a lot of data on IA technology used for commercial establishments, which is what this project is treating. So we even just assigned that a 15 milligrams per liter. And when you look at it, the impact of this project is the equivalent of installing over 20 individual on-site systems. So this project is having that impact on the current aquifer. And I've got another table in here that I'll refer to. There with me. Is that we computed the impact on Gardner's Creek of this project discharging over a man-wearing road, and it's the equivalent of 1.25 houses in discharging into that watershed, conventional septic systems. So the impact is pretty de minimis, as well as there's a large number of properties in that watershed that are currently developed that just use conventional septic systems, as well. And there's commercial establishments there, as well as my understanding, there's a healthy number of undeveloped, developable lots. So the discharge at the man-wearing site is pretty de minimis, as well as we discussed this with the town engineer, that, the project can easily be turned into a net nitrogen positive project by frankly simply having two properties within that watershed, converting them to IA technologies, in which case the entire project with that would have a net positive impact on Gardner's Creek. And the cost associated with that is within the project budget. So that's there. Now, if you don't mind, Supervisor, I'm going to jump around a little bit just because of stream of consciousness. I've spent a lot of time dealing with this. The other comment that were made, well, excuse me, I also wanted to point out, we have sent the East Hampton Springs School a number of FOIL requests for information about the IA system that we understand Mr. Gobler's has participated in, to understand, frankly, I initially wanted to see, too, what's your strength of wastewater like compared to what I expect it's going to be here and what we've seen in other locations, as well as naturally, how well does the system work? Well, no answer since May until a week or so ago, and then we were provided one data point for the middle of July. And it was pretty, it's pretty telling. It's pretty, let me call it unprofessional, that they didn't even respond. And then what they responded with was the middle of summer when nobody's there. So, or no, I shouldn't say nobody's there, but it's obviously not full time. So it doesn't speak well. There was comments here about conversations with the Suffolk County engineer regarding, let me call them variance to the new, to the 150-foot well setbacks, and that purportedly was going to be okay. We can put them in. But this is well known to us. We've dealt with this issue. We've engineered over 50 systems in the last 3 years in Suffolk County. So we're very aware, we've got experience dealing with it. But again, I just go back to the discussion that this town board had, in which, we already considered that it's been rejected, okay, or the town's made that policy decision, okay. The next comment in the executive summary is that the project will reroute the flow from the wastewater from this area and discharge it into the Gardner's Creek watershed, and then it's poorly flushed, highly restricted, inlet, et cetera. So the system is prone to eutrophication, okay? In our opinion, well, first of all, there's also concern about traversing water supply wells, okay? We've examined that issue, it's in the report as well. And as you know, we've had a lot of communications with Sylvester Manor. They have endorsed the project. by letter. It's in writing. And there's only one house down gradient of the discharge location. And whether it intercepts that well is debatable, as well as, I believe it's got to be at least a dozen workforce houses on one side of 16 Man-Waring Road, and it holds a lot of other properties in there. And so the discharge from, this system at the Man-Waring side is going to be clean, as well as a lot of, quote, bad, untreated, if you will, or just conventionally treated by a septic system that overwhelms any impact on the area. So, but that's not to say that we, can't do better. And I think doing better is just to make the whole project totally net positive nitrogen impact. And that's the reason that we've gone to the next step to add the emergent contaminants. But we're going to be judicious as to how to do it and when to do it. And I can get into the technical part, but I don't want to get distracted. The next claim is that it states, while the proposed treatment system is purported to reduce nitrogen to 3 milligrams per liter, this is more than 2 orders of magnitude higher than nitrate levels in and around Gardens Creek and could have negative impacts. Well, first of all, this is a speculative statement that, in my opinion, is devoid of context. The short answer is, as I said before, without getting into more details, is that this is the equivalent of 1.25 houses that we're adding to that watershed. And there's a lot of other houses in that watershed that are dealing with it. And by converting the project into a no net nitrogen impact, we're part of the solution. We're not part of any negative impact in that area. Next comment was the drinking water wells that will be impacted have not been identified. That's an incorrect statement. They have been identified. We know exactly where they are. The well maps of Sylvester Manor that were provided to us by Sylvester Manor. And again, we think at best one property would be traversed. And one can easily, avoid speculation by just looking at Google Earth and seeing what properties are downgraded of the proposed location. And we provided the groundwater direction map that shows which way to look. The next comment was that it states the ability of the proposed IA technology to be installed has an unknown track record treating high-strength wastewater, i.e. greater than 200 milligrams per liter of nitrogen anticipated. First of all, it's a terribly incorrect allegation. Mr. Goldberg doesn't know Lombardo Associates' track record. The nitrogen technology has been used at schools and agricultural facilities in the past. And it's even on our website. So we've dealt with high strength wastewater, as well as, we're very confident on how to deal with high strength wastewater. Then there's discussions about what we call the advanced oxidation process to get rid of the emerging contaminants. And I'm just going to summarily move from this and saying, and the allegations that no decision has been made on the technology. So any claims regarding the technology is not sensitive to the evolving nature of the technology, as well as, how we fit it into the project and what we exactly do is a design issue. Okay. It's as well as we may decide, like I said earlier, that the state of the art is such that the town should wait a little bit. My professional opinion is that there's a technique that's called electrochemical techniques is the sweet spot. If that technology matures, nicely, I think that is the best one for the town to use, but that's all to be determined, okay? We're in a rapidly evolving field, not the least of which is driven by PFOAs. And that's a huge problem that will drive technology innovation, okay? This last comment in the executive summary is relative to that it references the smart growth form that was used, and that it notes that sewers will enable compact development because it's considered an efficient use of higher density planning. And there's a note saying that any additional density will cause 4 to 5 pounds of groundwater. Well, that's known, as well as not going to pull up I would assume the town's not going to pull up the bridge over the moat or stop the ferries from coming, and that there's ways to deal with these things. Because you have legacy systems in there that would create, and as their treatment will help. That's really what you're dealing with, is a legacy. And there's a variety of ways to deal with these things. This is not cause for saying you can't add the equivalent of 1.25 houses. So now I'm going to try to go, so that's the comments on the executive summary that captured most of them. I'm going to try to just go quickly through the remainder of the reports so that it gets on the record. And so bear with me, because I don't want to get repetitive, because obviously these executive summary was pulled from the report. The one comment that I would make regarding the scope of the project, or the comments made on the scope of the project, et cetera, is that there's a lot of generalizations and that don't have basic engineering analysis and are not project specific. So generalization, we're in engineering a solution here, so we got to be very specific. And ideas, we're not engineering ideas, we're engineering solutions to problems, okay? So, again, there's quite a few, comments in here that are pretty inflammatory and unsubstantiated generalizations. And as a matter of fact, it's well known by the submitter of these comments that the way you deal with these things is through the Tmdl process. It's very well established, been on the law books since 1972 and 77. Yeah. And so it's very well known, it's very well articulated, and it's practiced throughout the United States. So that's the way you deal with it. And again, the project is proposing at current price 1.25 houses equivalent in that whole watershed. Okay, so that provides some context. And the Tmdl process, for those not familiar with it, is basically a budget process for a watershed in which you determine what's the maximum amount of, in this case, nitrogen that can be discharged and still achieve water quality standards. Okay, so in other words, you can't spend more money than you got, or you can't discharge more nitrogen than the system can handle. Okay. The next comments were relative again to the well, the down gradient wells, which we're talking one property. The number of down gradient wells from the current situation is pretty large. We didn't go through and add it because it's a little complicated, but it's easy 2 digits and perhaps even 3 digits of properties that are impacted by the current system. And obviously, that was the basis of this project starting in the first place, was because of groundwater contamination in down gradient wells. So, and it's not a small impact, it was contamination above public health standards. So, there's flies and then there's elephants. So things need to be dealt with in context. Okay. The next comment is the proposal for using a 3D time-dependent groundwater model of the area to determine where it's going to flow and where it's going to flow. You know, my opinion is a red herring. I mean, come on. We don't need to do a 3D groundwater flow model. That's called, it's usually mod flow, et cetera. First of all, now that's any project that does that, you're talking $60,000 to $100,000, et cetera. And we know which way the water's flowing. And it's going to only impact one house. So there's no cause for this. There's no objective scientific cause for this. Again, I think it's a red herring. Okay. Then there's allegations here regarding what is the ideal solution for this study area. And it's proffered here. Is one question is whether the proposed system is optimal for achieving this goal. Okay. The whole report that's been prepared provides basis on how we got to where we got. Okay. So, so where we are. So, there's, Mr. Goldberg makes comments here about the nitrix technology, et cetera, et cetera. He knows very well that his statements are false because under his leadership, the Stony Brook Center for Clean Water Technology has copied the nitrix technology. What the Stony Brook Center uses, what they call their nitrogen reducing biofilter, is a copy of what we engineered and had permitted in the state of Massachusetts in 2009. Okay, so as well as the technology was developed by our associate Professor Will Robertson, University of Waterloo, back in the 1990s, and Will works with us pretty routinely. But the short answer is there's nothing new there. We've been doing it, and it's been in the public domain for well over a decade. So now others have copied the nitrix technology. However, we're not aware of anybody that has achieved the nitrogen levels as low as we've been able to get it, well below 3. Okay, so there's other knockoffs around the country that exist of the so any allegation of proprietary and et cetera is just, it's untrue. It's not professional to be making untrue statements. Okay. Then there's allegations in here about why is Lombardo the only one in engineering the nitrix system? Well, that's false again. Okay. It should be noted that we were sole source selected by Suffolk County DPW in 2008 to engineer and deliver and implement and operate the wastewater system at the Suffolk County Environmental Center in Islip. So, excuse me, I'm from Boston. So that system's been operating for well over, I guess, 14 years now. And we were sole source selected by the county's engineer, okay? Because he knows of our work, okay? We were selected by Cashin Engineers and have been, and the nitrix system's been installed at Connecticut and Captree State Parks that receive wastewater as strong as is expected to be received here. It's virtually all bathroom wastewater. So it's the same wastewater strength that we're going to be seeing from the town. So, and those systems have been operating for years. And again, achieving very low nitrogen levels. So, so any event, so many of these are allegations. It's terrible that they're not only incorrect and attacking, but they're just wrong. Sorry. Then there's the comments here regarding our databases, et cetera. And, and without getting into the minutia here terribly, it's really telling that Mr. Goldberg's assistant was the engineer that authored the 2013 report issued by the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, in which they evaluated a number of technologies, including the Nitrex, and they sampled 5 systems twice throughout the country. And the average effluent quality of all those systems sampled by Camp Dresser McKee, who was hired by H2M, and Mr. Russo there was the engineering author of that. Our average was 1.57. Okay, so that speaks volumes. That's the data. It's also so any event. There's more comments in here, but I don't want to belabor things too. Then it's difficult to understand the motives when our use or sort of inclusion of a treating for the emerging contaminants is now being attacked, okay, where nobody else does it. So I guess the word "no good deed goes unpunished" is just being manifested here. So that just doesn't make any sense. And then there's Ms. Gobler presents data or references to data that the NPR, their nitrogen reducing biofilter, achieves some emergent contaminants removal by itself. But wait a minute, the technique that's used is exactly the same technique that's used in the Nitrex system. So I guess I should take that as a compliment, that the Nitrex system, but it's telling that acknowledgement is not being made, okay? But I guess a rebranded copy is better than the original. Most people like the original. So then there's further comments on the AOP, but again, I mentioned that before, what was done. We've taught it. Oh, one of the things that is telling is that Suffolk County, in a competitive procurement, has awarded the town a $250,000 grant for the proposed project. The committee that judged the project grant application included the Deputy Executive Peter Scully, the Principal Engineer John Sanjan, and during the project's interview that Town Engineer Joe Panora and I myself attended, no one from the committee even suggested that there was a better way. And I believe representatives from the group for the East End, well, I know they're on the committee, whether they were in attendance, I don't recall, but it's awfully, the contrast is telling that those folks, I understand, objected to the project at a prior meeting, but they were at the meeting and awarded the contract. So money talks is what I've been told. And so the county's put its money behind this project. So the award demonstrates the county support the project, okay? And it's been vetted by professionals competent in this work, okay? There's comments in here about how much it costs to do an IA technology at 20 to 25,000. Well, guess what? Those are old numbers. And how come they're not being adjusted for inflation? But we live in the real world, and so we know how much they cost because, again, we've done 50 of them in the last 3 years. Our experience, our clients tell us $25,000 to $30,000 for construction. That doesn't include the engineering and surveying work that's required associated with these systems that is not unusual to be $8,000. And surveying being even in some cases the big, cost factor. So to do in site conditions can make things really more expensive. So an IEA technology is really well over $30,000 per unit. And I know they tried to establish a goal at the center there of $10,000 to achieve under 10 nitrogen, the last 10 years, but that goal has now been abandoned. I just note that anything that an engineer does has to work. And it, and if we're liable if things don't happen the way we say that they should. Okay. One on serious matter is that on table 1, Mr. Goldberg presents a table of flows from the various buildings and discounts the flow from the school and the youth center. It doesn't indicate why, but presumably it's from some water use information, presumably. However, that's a violation, if you will, of engineering design requirements. A regulator would never accept that kind of discounting, okay? So the commentary there lacks any real world engineering experience, okay? And it's wrong. There was comments about the school and its need to replumb, et cetera. And the replumbing is needed regardless, because they have just a lot of pipes that come out of the building they need to deal with. And we understand that the technology company that has been considered for that project has never done a school previous to that. Okay, so this would be their first rodeo. So I would be a little concerned if I was somebody. Then you would need to look for a professional engineer to certify that it will work. Okay, otherwise that's a disaster waiting to happen. And the technology that's proposed there is not known for getting under 10. And under 10 is a permit requirement. Okay. Then the additional comments, and I'm close to the end. The additional comments were relative, again, high strength and I won't get into a long discussion, it's in the report, but it just speaks to the whole comparing apples and oranges. There's a lot of comparison of IA technology to what's being proposed. And first of all, the cost basis is incorrect from a construction cost, and it doesn't include the soft costs that are associated with any project. There's also a commentary on the O&M cost and references the $75,000 that we estimated for first year. Didn't make note that we also estimated that it would be in year 3 at $60,000, so just quote startup cost. Didn't realize that those numbers that exist there are pretty conservative. In other words, they're safe numbers, and we expect the actual cost to be significantly under $50,000. So understanding the numbers would be better. Okay, I spoke about that the NPR that they speak about is really a copy of the nitric system, and it's a copy of what they did in Florida as well. There's a number of academic institutions that have been experimenting with the NRB approach. We frankly are of the opinion that it's not the wisest approach. We think there's other ways to do it that are much more cost effective, as well as higher performance, and not the least of which is there's construction quality control challenges with that approach that we think are not worth it. But they have access to public funds to experiment with. We understand that the NPR, we've heard through the grapevine that the NPR systems cost well in excess of $40,000, but it would be interesting to hear what they really, what Mr. Goldman can say, what are the costs that they have experiences, and if anybody really has bought one, or are they really all the installations, are they all government funded projects, okay? And then one of the last comments was advocating the urine diversion, and again, we're very familiar with it. There's one of the leading universities is University of Michigan on this, and there's all sorts of issues associated with that. One of the practical ones is replumbing the buildings, You have to, and the other issue, not the mission, is what do you do with the rest of the wastewater? So, we would recommend that during the diversion really be focused, frankly, at good locations where they can be, the situations can be evaluated, or where there's a lot of urine production, like a brew pub, or gee whiz, there's schools. University facilities can be adapted to be, good locations. So we would, the technology needs to mature, and there's issues with it that, in my opinion, it's not ready for prime time in this kind of application, okay? Because if it's wrong and it doesn't work, as a professional engineer, we're liable. So we can't just experiment. Okay, so that's the conclusion, and I guess the last thing I'd like to say for now is that it's our professional opinion, my personal professional opinion, and I've certified this, that the nitric system here will achieve what we say it's going to, and that the proposed system is the optimal solution for the town. And we've obviously had public discussions on this, and it's been subject to, and we greatly appreciate comments from the public that we received all, and the project has refined in value from that as well. But during actual implementation, there's a lot of details to still work out. And so thank you, Supervisor, for the opportunity to provide comments on this, and hopefully we can get to a good resolution to move forward.
Thank you. Chris, you want to come up, or you?
Sure.
See if I can make it work from here. Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the invite, and thank you, Pio, for your comments as well. And I'm just going to start by saying I think we're all here for the same reason. I'd like to think, at least, and that's clean water. Right? You see the title here. We all want the same thing: clean water for Shelter Island. And the last time I was before this board was actually 3 years ago, more than 3 years, almost 4 years ago. I don't know who was still on the board then or was on the board then, and who recalls that presentation. County was here, and also the Nature Conservancy. And at that presentation, the just sort of impressing upon the board the importance of clean water. And actually, I'm super impressed by the progress that's been made since. This report here is clearly reflective of the town's interest and efforts towards moving on clean water for Shelter Island. So I think it's, like I said, I think 3-4 years ago when I was here, there wasn't a lot done towards IA yet, but that's not the fault of the town. That was every town was pretty much in the same boat, but the progress since then has been spectacular. And I think the idea of addressing this project is exactly, I think number one. So I think you prioritize what is really the most important thing, the strongest source of nitrogen in the area of Shelter Island that has the highest levels of nitrate in groundwater. So, so just leading off by just saying, literally congratulations on tackling a super important issue and prioritizing it. And again, I should mention, I think I mentioned then, I'll mention now, 30 years ago, this past spring was the first time I was doing research on Shelter Island with regards to clean water. And spent pretty much my entire graduate career on Shelter Island studying groundwater and groundwater flow and how it affects surface water quality. In fact, 3 of the 4 chapters of my PhD was based on research done on Shelter Island and West Bay. So Shelter Island holds a special special place in my heart. All those chapters incidentally were subsequently published. So I'm just going to go quick through the intro because I think it's all basic stuff, but I think it's also worth mentioning and going through, of course, the critical importance of water for Shelter Island and the very unique situation Shelter Island is in with regards to a very limited aquifer compared to other places, and the very strong connection that, as I said, I've made through my career in looking at how groundwater affects surface waters. And the situation across Suffolk County is quite similar to what's happened on Shelter Island with regards to as the population's grown, shows the levels of nitrogen in groundwater. And I think it's always worth putting in perspective where we are here when it comes to the nation. This is a paper published by Duke University, came out a couple of years ago. If you look at the y-axis, millions of people is essentially showing that 2/3 of the US has drinking water with nitrate levels less than 1 milligram per liter. You can see where Suffolk County is on average. Obviously across Shelter Island, you can find areas that are across this whole spectrum. We know, of course, we don't want nitrate above 10 milligrams per liter as per EPA guidelines and preventing blue baby syndrome. One thing I've been working a lot with the University Medical School with in the past several years, understanding the threats of less than 10 milligrams per liter to human health, and that there's emerging epidemiological evidence showing how high levels of nitrate can advance cancers. And so we want to be as protective as possible of our water. And we know in this case, and in many cases, the strongest source of nitrogen is wastewater. So addressing that only makes sense. And we know what the ramifications are of high nitrogen in water. This is a map that you're getting actually a preview of. I'm going to actually publish this map on Thursday. Essentially, it's showing water quality impairments across Long Island that have occurred essentially since June. And so, the situation on Shelter Island is shared by many locales across Long Island. And many things in those maps are harmful algal blooms. We know those blooms can get more intense and toxic with more nitrogen. And I think it's worth giving some specific examples about Shelter Island with regards to that. So I'll start with Alexandrium, which makes saxitoxin, a known neurotoxin. If you look at that molecule and you see the letter N, those are nitrogen atoms. So it's a nitrogen-rich toxin that gets more, cells make more of it when they have access to more nitrogen. We've surveyed all of Long Island for this organism. It is found on Shelter Island at fairly high levels. And that's a problem because once it's there, it forms something called cysts or seeds. It can actually reseed the environment every single year. And we know from examples in areas with high levels of wastewater nitrate, like Northport and Huntington Harbor, that they can experience widespread shellfish closures due to toxicity from this organism. And that high levels of nitrogen make the organism more intense with regards to blooms and higher levels of toxin on a per cell basis. Another harmful algal bloom related to nitrogen is brown tide. This is actually what I studied for my PhD. It led to the demise of both shellfish and seagrass on Long Island and also in Shelter Island. Here's one of those chapters from my PhD and showing you some of the research that was done on West Neck Bay. And so this is old data from the 90s, but essentially just shows the very high levels of nitrate in groundwater on Shelter Island. We tested it both in the wells leading up to the bay, what was seeping out of the groundwater and actually into the ecosystem. And then what you can see down in the bay, the levels are very, very low. So this is one of the points I'm trying to emphasize, is that even when you get the nitrogen levels down very low, it still means that the amount in the ecosystem is so low that when you discharge that nitrogen, it can have a strong effect on the ecosystem. And so, for example, this is just to show a sequence of events with regards to one of these events where high levels of nitrate in the water lead to algal blooms and ultimately to brown tides. Final thing I'm going to mention on the ecosystem front is the latest member of harmful algal blooms that have shown up on Shelter Island. This is Coclodinium polycricoides. It's known as an ichthyotoxic harmful algal bloom. And we've seen that in action. These are pictures that I took at our marine lab in Southampton. That's played out in other places across Long Island as well. And it's present on Shelter Island as well. In fact, the very first documented case of this bloom occurred on Shelter Island. And I'm going to talk more about that momentarily. And we know that this is something that gets stimulated with more nitrogen. So any increase in nitrogen leads to a more intense bloom and more negative consequences with regards to effects on the ecosystem and potentially human health. Okay, so thankfully, like I said, this has been prioritized in this report here, and what we're talking about today is to address the high nitrogen and address that plume of high nitrate in the center of Shelter Island. And clearly beyond the having concerns with regards to the quality of the groundwater, we also want to certainly be thinking about the quantity of the groundwater and how that's affecting communities. We know that most of the nitrogen is coming on Long Island is coming from wastewater. There's a report that was done by the Nature Conservancy. Suffolk County repeated this study and identified not all of these subwatersheds, but many of them essentially the same outcome. And that's why in the 2020 Suffolk County subwatershed study that was released, the center and western part of Shelter Island was put as a number one, the highest priority for addressing excessive nitrogen load. And therefore, thankfully, they're coming in to help with addressing nitrogen loading here on Shelter Island. So now, looking at the project and just thinking about a few different things, some of which Peter addressed, some of which maybe wasn't brought up, but this is from Peter's report, and there's the study area there. And so, the one thing I'll mention, of course, the project seeks to capture flow from multiple buildings across North Ferry Road. And I should mention, if it's not clear already, this is very recent data put together by the USGS defining the subwatersheds for Shelter Island, so the most sophisticated modeling available. So current conditions is the water from all the buildings that are being addressed here flows to different locations. Some may be going to Manatee Creek, others may be going to Cockles Harbor. Some is already going to Gardeners Creek. Some might even make its way to West Neck Bay. But this project, of course, is creating a new situation, right? Where instead of that water being dispersed across Shelter Island, now it's all going to be collected, and then it's all going to be sent to the northwest corner of the island. So one thing to consider there is that this project, therefore, will be redirecting groundwater flow. And so creating a groundwater deficit south of the project, for example, where the school is, and there's a lot of water use there, and a water excess to the northern reaches of the project. And when we think about water use, outside of golf courses, probably the school may be one of the biggest uses of water to date. Currently, the school use, that water recharges right back into the aquifer. Now that water will not recharge there. Instead, it's going to go north and go towards Gardeners Creek. The overall net effects on the groundwater flow in that region may be negligible, but it's not hasn't been addressed thus far. And then specifically talking about the flow to Gardeners Creek, some points I brought in my report, Pio addressed some of these, but the question is, what are the wells being intercepted? Those weren't called out in the report. I'll take Pio's word that there's a single well only. I think to me it looked like there was more than a single well, but if that's what you saw, Pio, then I'll take you at your word that there's only one well being affected by this project. But it certainly wasn't called out in the reports. And we can take it at face value further. This is the exact flow, but as Pio mentioned, there could be groundwater modeling to get a better sense of that. But just then thinking about Gardeners Creek, I gave an introduction with regards to water quality impairment. And so the two most impaired water bodies on Shelter Island, surface water bodies, are West Neck Bay and Manatee Creek. Right? So these were made the highest and second highest priority for cleanup with regards to the Suffolk County subwatershed study. And they have two things in common: elevated levels of nitrogen load and restricted and poor flow. And so what I would like to say is that's exactly the conditions you find in Gardeners Creek as well. The creek has a very, very narrow inlet. You can see it here, not a lot of flow. On the left side, you can see the almost culvert through which the water body is exchanging, and on the right side, you can see the fairly expansive nature of that creek. It's maybe the third largest marine water body, enclosed marine water body on Shelter Island behind Monantic and behind West Neck Bay. And so all the flow from the buildings now, as I mentioned, we headed towards Gardner's Creek. Again, I already mentioned, if you want to find water quality impairment on Shelter Island, the perfect conditions are restricted flow and higher levels of nitrogen load. And that's, potentially what we're creating here. Certainly there's going to be treatment of this nitrogen, but there's still going to be nitrogen left. And any increase in nitrogen will exacerbate the conditions that are present in Gardner's Creek. And so, one important factor, but unfortunate fact, is that while places like West Neck Bay, which had a very rich history of data, had a very specific plan for nitrogen mitigation, I was on actually the committee that chose the water bodies that the Suffolk County Soil Watershed Study selected. And so I worked with Suffolk County Department of Health Services. We looked very carefully at essentially every single water body, but of course they had a budget. They couldn't consider every water body, and not every water body got considered. Gardner's Creek didn't make the cut. But if you look carefully at Gardner's Creek, I'll just say this is a Google Earth image that I pulled down just in the last week. And in addition to being restricted, and I would encourage any of you or anyone to look at this Google Earth image and zoom in and out and compare the water there to what you see in the surrounding water bodies. And if you zoom in, what you essentially see is water discoloration. And while on the one hand, this could mean absolutely nothing, I'll say the last time I did this and saw this, I spoke to a community in Setauket, a place called Conscience Bay, and saw the same exact images. And I said, it looks to me like you have a rust tide there. We followed up, and in fact, they did experience rust tides. So from these images, I believe there are harmful algal blooms probably already occurring in Gardner's Creek. And again, any increase in nitrogen loading is going to make these events more intense. And it is the perfect condition for having these sorts of harmful algal blooms. Okay, so moving on now just to talk about the project. We talked about the costs, and there were PO addressed, and it's good to know that there's some flex money in there so that if it was higher because of inflation, that would be counted for. I just know the AOP system was added, between July and August that wasn't in the budget, so just point that out. PO did point out about that Nitrex is used a lot. I'll just emphasize it's never been used for a residential on-site location. There are multiple systems that have been approved. Nitrex is not approved for residential use. It's been used for larger systems, and that's what we're talking about here, but it's not getting used. There's literally hundreds of installations of IA systems being done in Suffolk County every month, and while there's been dozens of Nitrex, it's not getting installed at homes, and so that's not one of the systems that are being considered by Suffolk County. And then with regards to this overall project, I think I didn't hear it being refuted, and I think it is the case. More nitrogen could be removed for less money by installing IA systems. Okay, so if maybe we can finish.
Discuss it when you're done.
Sure. But the school already had a project, and you can see what the cost of that was for that project. If you do the difference between that and the individual buildings, with the remaining money, you could be doing IA systems for the other buildings. PO mentioned the cost. I'll just mention I took the cost from the Suffolk County Department of Health Services website, thankfully just before they got hacked. So these are the most recent costs that were available to put into the report. And then, you mentioned the flow that I used in the table was wrong. No, it was not wrong. When you did your design, you designed as because you have to design the system to the maximal possible flow, right? And that's dictated by the code.
That's your comments. You can say what you want.
I'm just going to speak.
Hey, don't speak to me. Speak to the board, please.
Okay, well, this is actually to a comment that you had made, so I am sort of speaking to you. You brought up this comment, so I'm just sort of addressing the point that you made.
You can address the comment, but I think you should be talking to the public and the board.
Okay, well, I won't look towards you, I'll look towards you.
Yeah, I think you should.
In that table, the flows that are in there are based on the actual use, right? So the overall flow is put together, assuming that, for example, a school is going to get used 7 days a week, 365 days a year, but the actual use that's not the actual use. And similarly for the youth center, right? The youth center, the use of the youth center, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I don't think anybody believes the youth center gets used at its full capacity over time. So that table for those two buildings was based on what actual use would be.
It has to take into account any potential future uses. So let's say, for example, down the line, the school is no longer a school. It may now be the government town building that runs 365. You have to accommodate for that. That's why it's calculated that way.
Supervisor, may I make a comment?
Let's let him finish. Just make it.
I'm taking notes. Yeah, move on. Let's move.
It was a theoretical, it's hypothetical.
I commented on the plan as it currently exists, right? So we know what the flow, maximal flow is, but we know what the actual flow is also just based on the actual, when there are people in the school, and it's not 365, 7 days a week. So, and when we're trying to look at ecological impacts, there's a difference between engineering that has to be done according to code, and then there's, essentially what gets done based on what the ecological impacts are. And we just want to be as realistic as possible, right? So we wouldn't want to, for example, even for the youth center, right? So the youth center is not used, every day of the year, all year round. And so just trying to adjust it to be realistic is what that model did. So I know there've been some questions. Can the IA systems be put on these lots? I did have a phone call with both John Sondren and Walt Dwidiak, and went through this. I first spoke with engineers who said, yes, of course, you get a variance. I then spoke to both John Sondren, who approves these systems, and Walt Dwidiak. This wasn't easy because, again, they've been hacked, so we actually had to I called Walt's cell phone. They both got by the cell phone, and I spoke with them, and I gave them the exact situation here, and they told me that they give variances for installing IA systems, so long, the overall idea being, so long as the current distances don't change. And they're maintained, even if we don't have the 150 feet. And they said, I just, in that phone call said every time they've done that. And again, I affirmed with them that was both for non-residential and for municipal buildings. And as an example, there's a project in Urine, so the post office here. So there they wanted to upgrade their system and put in an IA system. And I spoke to the engineer. And here they put in a hydro action system. So this is a non-residential municipal building where they put in a hydro action IA system. They were non-conforming. They didn't have the 100 feet separation. But the distances to the discharge and well didn't change. And so based on that, they got the variance. And so here are the plans for that signed by Suffolk County using an IA system for a non-residential location that didn't have the proper distance between the discharge and the wells. And I won't go a lot into the AOP. I would just say that I think it needs to be done carefully. It is something that is great for getting contaminants out of water. It was something new. I've been trying to just essentially address what this project is, and it wasn't in the first report. There was a mention of ozone in the second report, and then AOP was discussed in August. And I get it. It's an evolving project, but I'm just trying to comment on what the project is. And I guess this part is in motion, so to speak. So it's not, hasn't been settled there. It is, as you mentioned, it is an emerging field. And it is changing a lot. And I've worked on this as director of the Center for Clean Water Technology. Just some very important things, that the function of any sort of drinking water treatment is going to be a function of the quality of the water that you're treating. And that's both the contaminants that are in there, but also other things. The amount of organic matter that's in there, the amount of nitrate that's in there, the amount of iron that's in there. And the functionality changes based on all these different aspects. So it's compound and source water specific. And the improper match of treatment with the water can result in the formation of something called secondary byproducts that can create a public health hazard. So for example, ozone can lead to bromate formation. Some types of AOP can create PFAS, even though you want to be removing it. We just published on that, and the reference is in my report. And so, I'll just say on this front, if you really want to be able to treat the contaminants in that wastewater, that aggregated wastewater from all the sites together needs to be tested. And you need to want to know what's in there that you're removing, and what's the other composition, and how will that affect whatever you choose to be the treatment option. So, but without knowing that what that aggregated wastewater looks like, the optimal solution can't be designed. And then Peter just mentioned these last things. These are just direct quotes that, the ideas of compact development and the system being designed to accommodate future expansion. And then very simply, just pointing out additional people and additional nitrogen will exacerbate things. And if the system goes as designed, that would be more nitrogen headed towards garbage creek. So I think that's all I was going to present today. So it sounds like we might have some discussion points. So happy to sit down or just stay there. Okay.
Stay there. So reading over this, I noticed a few significant errors. The first being that you're presenting the concept of replacing the existing systems with IA systems as if these were residential structures. So the pricing you use is for a residential installation of an IA system. And it's well known that the pricing on the county's website is not completely accurate. But taking that into account, a commercial system is significantly different than a residential installation. When you design a commercial system, you're not taking into account just the flow rate, you're taking into account the strength of the effluent. So most of the times the system is significantly larger. I don't know if you've looked around, we're short on space. These things would have to go under parking lots, under driveways. We need covenants, they'd have to be traffic bearing. There's a significant amount of engineering and re-plumbing, and there's a lot that would have to go into trying to do individual IA systems, and they wouldn't do the same. They wouldn't treat to the same level. So 10 milligrams per liter is what right now the county's getting on the best day with an IA system, and that's only treating for nitrates. So, a few things, the fact that you make the assumption that these are being treated like residential systems is false. So your math is just wrong when it comes to the cost for that.
Can I just mention that this, even if the math is wrong, remember that there's enough money left over to put in 50 more systems. So I think there's lots of wiggle room in the math. And I'm happy to go over that with you. If you didn't want to talk about that further, then I'm just trying to point out.
But wait a minute, there's no money left over if the cost is significantly higher than you cited.
Right.
So what you just said
What
is.
I'm saying is that, so in my report, what I pointed out is that the difference between the $3.1 million and what it would cost to do the IA system, the amount left over, even at what I budgeted, is
Which is wrong.
Which is all based on a false premise.
Right.
But there's millions of dollars left, right? Enough to do 50 other
Because
homes.
there's no money
Less
left.
$100,000 to install. It'll cost
Again,
$250,000 to do some of these systems. Like, you're not.
to understand.
Can I ask a couple of comments, if I may? First of all, it would be helpful, you're making a lot of engineering comments, as if you're an experienced professional engineer. So I find those, well, first of all, My understanding is you're not, correct? You're not a registered professional engineer.
That's correct.
Okay. Have you ever designed anything that similar to what you're proposing for the town to consider?
We've designed lots of non.
Have you designed?
I've worked with engineers.
And you've worked with other,
Peel, let him answer.
Examination. Sorry.
Wait, come on, your language.
all right, I don't need to belabor it. My point is that, to Meg's point, there are significant issues with engineering for these properties, not the least of which is space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just trying to raise those up. That's number one. You made a comment on one of your slides that I want to correct, because you make a lot of erroneous statements. You state on one of them that the nitrix is not approved for residential property. That's terribly wrong. That's wrong.
Is it approved in Suffolk County for residential property?
Absolutely.
No, it's not. There's 6 systems. I can name the system. Meg would know this.
Excuse me, it is approved on a piloting basis for residential applications.
No one can install the system, right? There's 5 systems that are.
I don't want to debate it.
This isn't going to devolve into a debate.
Yeah. Mr. Goldberg, I'm just telling you as the applicant for that permit, I'm telling the board rather than you, because you want to debate. As the applicant, the nitrix technology is approved in Suffolk County. They have a tiered structure to go through their approval process. The other allegation that he makes that's, disingenuous is that, oh, gee whiz, nobody else is engineering the nitrix system. Oh, yes, it is. However, the bottom line is that the nitrix technology is the best performing system on the market, not the least cost one. And the decisions that are made about which technology get used, 99% of the time is what's the cheapest one that's on the market. And I can tell you, our client, that's all they want to know. What's the least costly solution? So, and it is being used for residential applications in Massachusetts because the state now is requiring lower levels of treatment. So,
I make a comment?
all right, I want to finish up.
I just wanted to say there was a movement
Yeah, let me
on whether
just-
nitrix is residential or not, because we're dealing with commercial.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I just want to.
my point just is that making false statements.
Can I? Okay.
No, and then next thing, I want to finish up if I may.
spoke for 45 minutes.
Please.
I'm done.
I just have a quick question for you, just because you, in Gardeners Creek, you spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I live on it, so it's important.
Yeah.
Well, it's important anyway. But would there be any removal as the effluent made its way underground, further filtering of that 3 per?
Not for nitrogen,
No, not at all.
because it
Okay.
stays as nitrate.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, Pia, there's like 6 systems that people can install in their homes in Suffolk County, and nitrix is not one of them. That's the statement I made. You just accused me of not telling the truth.
Okay, fine, let's not debate it.
Okay, but Meg can affirm that that's exactly.
Convoluting commercial with residential installations. This
I know.
project is commercial.
100% Meg, but I'm just saying,
You brought it up.
accused me of not telling the truth, right? And you can affirm that what I just said is the truth. And the statement I made that he was referring back to is the truth. Can you?
I don't even know which statement you're talking about anymore.
If you install a nitrix in your home, once you get
Request to. I mean, you could request the county let you do it. It's a pilot program. So, I mean, it's an option. I'm not saying it's commonly done. It's not one of the six
Pre-approved.
on the list that you can just go and say, hey, I want that. But if someone wanted to, they could ask to do it as a pilot.
Has it been approved for provisional or general use in Suffolk County? That, which is the point that I'm.
Residential.
For residential.
Okay, which is different than what we're
No,
talking.
I don't really want to believe.
How does that relate to commercial?
It only relates because he was trying to use that as a.
Right, but I would like you to bring it back to the topic.
Absolutely.
No, but nitrix could be used in Suffolk County for commercial applications.
Correct.
Okay, good,
As
good.
written.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's really important.
Okay, let's open it up.
Wait, did you want to make any closing?
Oh, I'm sorry. Closing on it, feels like, thank you for, anyway, I guess just on the cost thing again, I think if you do the math and even expand out the cost there, if I could just finish my statement, I think that you'll find that there's money left to do many other systems, and that it would be less expensive than the proposed system. And also with regards to, not a lot of property and tearing things up. I mean, a sewer project and putting in, rerouting sewage from all these places, that's a significant disruption as well.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna open it up to the floor. Howard, you were the
Wait a minute,
first.
Jim.
He's reached his.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, Chris, sorry, could be there in person, but you made a very nice opening when you said we're all here for the same reason, and that be clean water. And then you said we made, and using your words, spectacular progress.
Yes.
And then using your words, municipal wastewater project, we should be patted on the back for it as we has made this priority number one.
Yep.
And I appreciate all that. And I think you did a nice job in terms of laying the groundwork, for why we feel so strongly about this project. In the interest of honesty, and I think it's a question on everybody's mind. The report on page 1 says this is a report commissioned by the Friends of Cockles Harbor Incorporated. Could you, for the public's sake, please explain your relationship of what brought you here to this project? I mean, you have a vast background here on Shelter Island, but what brought you here? Were you invited by the Friends of Cockles Harbor to participate in this? Are you being reimbursed for this? Could you explain that relationship? Just as a board member, I know if we're all being honest here, we all should be entitled to know why. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I was invited and they asked me, could I give a second opinion of this project and use my expertise to look at the project and provide, overall sort of a peer review, if you will, and I'm being compensated for it.
Thank you for the last comment.
You're welcome.
I did have a question, just before we go to the public. I was just trying to go through my notes that I'd taken. Your concern when we talk about going to Gardner's Creek, that, number of wells impacted. Have you considered that if we put locations, have it all in separate locations, the wells that get impacted, given that we're going from the center of town through a whole lot of residential communities?
Yeah, so
wells.
Yeah.
What you're saying?
Yes, that's my concern. So I just wanted to try and weigh
So
the
you're saying
balance.
current conditions versus
Or
Or
IAs.
even, no, if we cite them individually.
right. Yeah, so you would just have the same wells would be impacted, but I don't know what those are because it's not in the engineering report.
Trying to weigh. the-
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Okay, let's open it up to the public, then we'll,
Should I sit down or should I? I'm happy to do either.
Sit down.
you might as well sit, I guess.
Because
but the
everything should be
people have to
directed at
come
the
up.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yes.
also addressing us.
So I have a list of people that signed up to speak. I'll remind you that you have 3 minutes. Howard, did you want to talk? Howard here?
Yeah, Howard's here. Howard, did you want to talk?
No, that's fine.
You're just signing in?
Okay. Patrick? Okay. Greg?
Okay,
Come up, please. Come up and
Yeah, because of the microphones.
acknowledge who you are.
I'm Greg Toner. I'm speaking as a resident and not as a member of one of the water boards. And it's really to you guys. Right now, the system, the nitrate system is disposing the fluid in what looks to me to be about a 5 to 10 year residence time before it hits the salt water. That sound right? Versus if it's disposed of up here, it's a 25 to 50 year time frame. So both of you, just, should that play into the considerations that are being made in terms of how quickly the center gets cleaned, what it could mean to the plume that's discussed? So that would be my question to these two guys, just to explain the significance of how long it's going to be in the water. And then finally, I guess, if the disaster scenario, that it takes 5 years to get out to Gardner's Creek, and on year number 6, you can walk across the river. What happens then? That would be, is there any concept for that?
Yeah, you want to?
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could start, your point's well taken, is that the travel time from the the Man-Waring Road discharge is shorter than at this location. This is the longest because we're literally at the top. And for the reasons that we selected that site and the other sites that we prioritized on the project that ultimately was dismissed, it was to minimize the length of time that the effluent would be in the groundwater. From the, let me call it, water management perspective of, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't want to be contaminating the groundwater that's going to be with us for a long time. And the operative rule, if you will, in the professional practice is to go with the shorter detention times for that reason. It's a policy issue. Okay, so that's the reason why that location, it's our opinion to move it out of this area. For that is one of the major reasons for it. Okay.
A question.
And by the way, the comment keeps being made about impact on the Gardner's Creek. It's de minimis. It's 1.25 houses addition, and it's under consideration whether we'll turn that into net positive. So the impact, water quality impact on Gardner's Creek is really, even if we don't do anything different, is pretty small, okay? And maybe no impact, or rather positive impact. You know,
Does that influence the rate at which we clean here, the fact that it's going out there? Is there?
absolutely. And, there's a figure that's in the report, in our engineering report, that's from the USGS, that shows where the nitrate contamination is. And it's basically in the spine here, if you will, of all the watersheds. We're going to be taking out a significant mass of nitrogen. So that area is going to be not as red, if you will. So there's a big plus in those. And all those properties that are down gradient from this area that's just getting septic, drain field treatment are going to should be seeing improvements if they're impacted at all. If they are, this is a big plus for them. And the other piece of it that we are very concerned about is nitrate's one issue, but what else is in the water that we are concerned about? And, whether it's PFOA or pharmaceuticals, et cetera, et cetera. So, so for those reasons, one doesn't discharge into areas where you're in a water supply recharge area, or you avoid wells. That's the reason we did the analysis in the first.
Would you anticipate a change happening here in this area? Again, it's 25 to 50-year residents under our feet.
Right.
That nitrogen just doesn't evaporate at that point. Would you expect that we might start to see the trend of nitrates to turn in 5, 10, 25?
I would, absolutely. There's no question, yeah. You would see it. You should see it in the well data. I mean, we looked at some of the well data, frankly, as part of our Fresh Pond project, but it's visible. You can see it in the data results, and that should all be going away. Those nitrate levels should go down. Now, how fast, and it gets a little complicated, but it's going to take years. There was also someone made the comment about, gee whiz, moving, and we're really talking about moving the rule in the industry and in regulations is design code is what you have to prepare for under extreme conditions, okay? You don't design a facility for average conditions, because that means half the time it's not going to work. So you always design it for maximum, because it's got to work under any condition. the concern about moving, so if we have a 6,000 gallon a day system, then rule of thumb is, half of that is what the average flow is, so 3,000 gallons a day. So the question is, are you going to cause any significant disruption of moving 3,000 gallons a day from this area to over that area? I'm going to say, no, that's not a lot of water. 3,000 gallons of water, it's not a lot. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
What's the current level in Gardner's Creek?
Of nitrogen? Yeah, it's less than 0.03 milligrams per liter. And I just
But
want
you
to.
showed us a picture.
Can you just come up to the lectern?
Yeah,
Can you come up to the?
yeah, just because people on Zoom can't hear you. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Well, can you state your question again?
So you, because you showed us an aerial that seemed to indicate that it already was struggling with
Yes.
nitrogen
that's what it looks
contamination
like, Yeah,
at that level?
yeah, exactly. And I just want to point out that math that Pierre just did is exactly the math in my table that he took issue with. The idea that you design to a maximum, but you just said, yeah, but there's actually an average flow. You just took issue with that. For me, for my table.
Average
we're not
flow is
using
half
the
of it,
maximum.
not a quarter.
Right, okay. But your argument was just being, don't use the maximum, use a realistic amount. So that suited you when you were.
All right, let's debate another time.
Volume, but it wasn't okay for my table. So.
All right, whatever. All right.
Thank you.
Chris, are you going to share your presentation? Like, we didn't.
Happy to send it to you.
Thank you.
That would be good.
Julie, you're next on the list.
My only
You
question.
have to come up.
Sorry. So my only question is, and this is kind of directed to this,
Okay.
is that it was indicated that at some level, the amount of nitrates that are flowing from the groundwater into the surface water is, you want to keep it below a certain level. You said, I think it was a couple of orders of magnitude higher than the nitrates in that body of water currently. Is there a threshold, like there is, drinking water standards and things like that? Is there a threshold, and what is that threshold? I've heard 0.45 milligrams per liter, but I don't know. So that's my question. What is the threshold for surface water beyond which now you're getting into tricky areas?
All right.
Just to get some comments.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Gobler said this in his report, but the general rule, and it varies from one location to the other because of site-specific conditions, but the general rule for nitrogen levels in brackish waters is typically in the 0.35 range, is the levels above which you're in trouble. You're going to get into algae blooms. Now, I've seen studies, we don't do the work, I'm just parroting what other scientists do, and then I've seen it vary from 0.25 to 0.45 range. That's still, and I believe there's over 40 studies that were done in Massachusetts Bay that identified that. Okay?
And I would agree with that for total nitrogen, but this is specifically nitrate.
Right.
And there's a big difference because the nitrate is the most bioavailable form for plants and for algae. And the other thing that's tricky in answering this question is what they're known as ecological tipping points. And so, yeah, and so the problem is ecosystems are not engineering projects, and therefore it's not always known what those ecological tipping points are. Like I said, there's already signs that the system is, because of its poor hydrological flushing and pre-existing conditions, is already experiencing issues. And so we don't know what the tipping points are with regards to it being further degraded.
Can I just ask a follow-up? And that is there a body of water, a surface body of water on Shelter Island that would be suitable for a sub-watershed with this kind of system to discharge into? And if so, what is that?
The Shelter Island Sound is like a perfect example, just because the water there just moves. You take a ferry over, right? The currents are moving so strong that water goes away right away. That's sort of the problem with this particular location, is that the water, because of that constricted narrow outlet in the, it takes a while for that water to move through. problem. When it goes to somewhere like Children on Sound, it's moving so quickly, it's not going to be an issue. And I will just say that in Suffolk County, in fact, when they prioritize water bodies, consider that. So that's why Children Island Sound, for example, is the lowest priority for oak because they consider the fact that it's not the amount of nitrogen, but it's the amount of nitrogen and the residence time of the water. So.
Thank you.
Kate, you're on the list. Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
Oh,
You don't have
Yes, I
to.
did.
I just wanted to be here.
Okay, you just signed in. Okay. Okay. Peter Grand is next.
Yeah, Ken Heischer.
Yeah, Peter's been waiting. Go ahead, Peter.
No, I haven't been waiting that long. Thank you very much. So I really do appreciate this conversation. I appreciate Dr. Gobler's contribution. A lot of the work that I've been doing over the last decades has been based on work that he's been doing over the last decades. So I just want to express kind of deep respect for the work that he's been doing. I also find his report very enlightening. And I think that one of the things that it underlines and emphasizes for me is how important doing this system, or some system, but doing this system really is. If you take the implications of what he's saying. And I also respect what he has to say about Gardiner's Bay in particular. I also would, have sympathy in my heart as a homeowner for like the one home that is being influenced by 1.2 homes being put right above it. I mean, I'm not in the mode to ignore that particular house even. So I have two questions. The first for PO is, so the water that we're treating now, is it potentially usable for as reclaimed water for non-agricultural irrigation projects? So that would be my first question.
It does not meet the county requirements for it.
Mhm.
Could it meet the county requirements? Sure. As a minimum, disinfection would have to be added.
Disinfect. Okay, so that gets me to the second question, which is Dr. Gobler spoke, and very rightly, about how tricky the treatments themselves are. And what that speaks to for me is, he also spoke to another concern that I share, which is that there's a concentration of waste going on with any such system. We're pooling effluent at this point. But one of the advantages to pooling effluent, of course, and also one of the requirements of the trickiness of treatment is that we now have the opportunity with this pooled waste to test this pooled waste. I'm curious, do you think that we would be able to do testing that would, public health testing that would like show, for example, if there were the level of COVID in the community or things like that in the future?
Well, testing wastewater for COVID is practiced throughout the United States by large, wastewater agencies. If it was desired to, if the town desired to do that, I'm sure there's outfits that can be engaged to do that.
Okay, and then in terms of the various kinds of treatment, you were yourself saying that we're going to go slowly and we're going to find our way toward what additional treatment for emerging contaminants should be applied, and technology is evolving at the, what's the most cost-effective solution might be something that TBD. But what do you see as the program once we start pooling this wastewater, assuming the project goes forward? What do you see as the testing protocol, the testing program to sort of analyze that and figure out, well, what else should we do in terms of testing this pooled wastewater?
To address the emerging contaminants?
Well, in general, to monitor what we have and what might necessarily, emerging contaminants, public health issues, whatever testing. I mean, we have wastewater here now pooled. It's available for testing for the first time. We could do community health monitoring with it and also testing for emerging contaminants. So to my eye, the testing program or the regular kind of just examining the waste is the critical step. to knowing what comes next, what we should do, and whether you reuse spray water or whatever.
Yeah, no, I understand your point. It's well taken. First of all, the testing program that is done is, let me call it regulatory prescribed. The testing program that we have provided for is the testing program that we can demonstrate permit compliance, and as well as fully understanding the strength of the inflow water. So that's the basic testing that's done. In terms of testing for constituents of concern that would affect any AOP process that's selected, that's down the road, and we're well aware of what needs to be tested for, whether it's TOC or whether it's bromide. Bromide would be one of the issues. There's a whole suite of items that would get tested, but there's no need to be doing that now. We would test that later, and frankly, that can be tested on the raw wastewater that comes out of these buildings, out of the septic. So there's ways to test for those issues during design, should we need to. We don't expect we'll need to. Any testing beyond that, let's say at the treatment plant, in terms of the effluent quality, whether it's COVID or bacteriological, those are all discretionary. And naturally, when you start getting into some of those things, they're expensive to do. So that's a town decision to the degree to which, and it would be naturally great to have, let me say, even have it done by a student, graduate student or whatever that could do it. But we're not providing budget for that because it's discretionary. But it can be done to the degree the town is interested in having it done.
Yeah, great to know that it's available. Thanks.
Okay. Jan?
Hello, friends of Cockles Harbor. I just want to ask your criticism of the report. You went over many areas, but you did not address the fact that your report stated that there are insufficient setbacks in the center. And now we know from Suffolk County Department of Health Services, they'll grant variances, okay? So it is possible to just take out the existing system and put AI system in its place. And so given that this is the situation, and when last year, the school was planning to go and implement its own system, which was which was costed at about $800,000. And AI systems individual AI systems are not that expensive. And I know Meg challenged this number, 25,000.
I absolutely.
Okay, so let's say 40,000, right?
Well, she's saying more like 250,000.
250,000 per AI system, is that correct?
Or a commercial system, which is what you would need.
Of what
Yes.
size?
For the fire department,
Okay, so let's check those assumptions, but let's just assume it's not 25,000, but 40,000, okay? So we're talking.
We can't assume that.
Okay, can you please do not interrupt me?
Just my point to that would be just. So
What I'm saying is, let me finish my sentence, okay? That the cost of distributed alternative systems, okay? Together, it's a fraction of the centralized system, of which 1.5 million is just the cost of piping this all the way to Manwaring Road, okay? So how can you, given this, what's the advantage of that system, which is located so far away?
Right.
And piping running through entire Route 114?
Yeah, I mean, we understand, and we understand why you would, think that way. But here's what really needs to be done. First of all, this issue has been debated and considered by the board, and for a variety of reasons, not only the setback issue, for a whole variety of reasons, it was dismissed, okay?
What reasons are
Well, I
those?
said a whole variety of reasons. Now, let me
No,
just
but
let
you
that.
make those blanket statements, but then you don't explain.
Can I finish, right? Okay, but I'm just saying that the issue has been debated and, okay. What's missing for us to have a rational discussion is for someone to put together a preliminary plan that says, yeah, this is how you can do it. it's just being thrown out that, oh yeah, you can do that over here in $40,000. Life doesn't work that way. We gotta know, yes, it'll fit. And the cost for it is reasonable to say, yeah, that's the reasonable cost, which takes serious preliminary engineering work, okay? It's not done on the back of an envelope, and it's not using somebody else's cost information. Now, we have experience doing these things, so it's going to be very challenging to put the IAs here, and it's going to be costly. Now, what does all costs are? One really has to do with the proper engineering and to analyze, but it's not $20,000.
Okay, so is that not, so the school, which is by far the biggest generator of UV, was 800,000, okay? Half of the.
The initial was 800 to $1 million 2 years ago.
I've seen it years ago.
800 to $1 million.
800,000, I have that printout, I can show it.
I can
But doesn't matter.
tell you.
Let's not, let's not quibble. Here we start.
Let's quibble, 800 to $1 million 2 years ago.
So let's, this system here is half of the cost, is just to move the effluent, okay? 3,700 feet, I would think, okay? 1.5 million goes there. That does not do any good, no treatment, no nothing, okay? It's just moving the stuff, okay? And you're telling me that to put the school system for 800,000 and distributed AI systems for small buildings, those are residential floors, like one house. It will cost me 250,000 per system, per tiny system, for the building that generates
It's based on county regulations, not what we would like to do. The county has commercial restrictions that you have to meet, and that's what Meg's trying to explain.
Okay.
We have more people wanting to speak.
Okay,
We have more
yeah,
people
time.
wanting to speak.
Okay, when Peter Grant was speaking.
Peter Grant's a committee member.
That's fine, but not of this committee.
No,
Yes, he's on the water advisory.
Jan, you had your agent speak for a while. Can you let other people have an opportunity to speak? Does anyone else want to speak?
Yeah, we do. Kevin, you're next.
Good afternoon, Town Board. My name's Kevin McAllister. I'm founder and president of the H2O. The board may recall approximately 1 year ago, I was before the board with others, some of the other NGOs urging the town to really move forward in some positive wastewater management actions. As a preamble to what I say today, I just want to requalify myself. As the board may recall, my background is in biological sciences. I hold a master's in coastal zone management. My training is extensive, over 35 years. Relative to this issue at hand, I served as 16 years as Peconic Baykeeper. In 2005, I was instrumental in bringing this issue of wastewater management, nitrogen pollution to our bays to the fore. I've been involved in litigation, trying to put an end to grandfathering. I've been extremely scrutinizing of sewage treatment systems and performance. And now relative to, I guess, the issue at hand, I've participated very actively on the county's Article 6 work group. So over the course of several years, I'm well-versed in the policy changes, what the goals are, et cetera. We all agree on the goals, which is clean water. This particular setting, I think, is appropriate for a centralized sewer district. I think it makes great sense. I am versed and well aware, going back 15 years ago, in reviewing performance data on this system, Nitrix, which is in fact an offshoot of the Waterloo system, which going back in 2005, certainly I became aware of and tried to introduce to Suffolk County to put into active use. Again, the performance of this system, as I understand it from Mr. Lombardo, is guaranteed in and around 9 milligrams. That's, am I correct? Or lower?
Yeah, lower.
Okay.
Lower.
That's exceptional performance. One thing we get caught up in is actual level of treatment with these IA systems, with the county has set the bar at 19 milligrams versus, let's say, the 3 milligrams. That's really doesn't matter when it comes to the overall loading. That's what we have to be cognizant of. How much nitrogen is entering this water body? Can it be assimilated to keep it in good health? If there's overload, then we have the problems that Dr. Goldberg was describing. Again, I think this makes perfect sense as a centralized location. The performance is superior. The loading is de minimis, and the actual relocation of recharge to Gardner's watershed is inconsequential. So again, I urge you, going back a year ago, progressive steps. This is outstanding. I urge the town board to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on Kevin, a little more than a year ago, I guess, it was a group combined of the Shelter Island Association, the Nature Conservancy Group for the East End, the Conic Baykeeper, and Kevin's group that came to the town to work with us on this. And I see Bob's here. He was on those meetings. And we have been working on it, obviously. And we value your input for us.
Bill or Ken?
Ken.
You're next.
And
Ken.
Okay. Sympathize with me sometimes also.
Yeah, I've done it too.
Okay. I'm Ken Peischer, speaking for myself as in somewhat from the Motor Advisory Committee standpoint. I'd like to commend Kevin for all the work you've done and trying to clean up the water in our bays. And Chris, for all the analysis that you've done over the years. I've read every paper that you've ever produced. You're coming from a good place. I also would like you to pay attention to where it would be a good place to put this water effluent would be the Sound, where we do have good flushing. It is marginal with regards to the location that I've chosen, but it's a cost benefit analysis. I'm also very happy to see so many people concerned about nitrates. This is refreshing for me. I would like to see you all more concerned about nitrates in our aquifer as well as in our bay waters. We have a particularly big issue here, and it's not just a small septic system, it's effluent. It's a nitrate that we put on our lawns and all the things in those products, like the herbicides, pesticides, and so forth, that are causing our bays to really kind of go belly up. It's been a tough year. The water's been warmer than normal. The scallop season looks marginal. And so anything we can do, including nitrates, in regards to our lawns and restricting that. If you think something as important as this, why don't you jump on the bandwagon and try and help us get rid of nitrates that are used for our lawns to keep them green, which we really don't care about anymore. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, you're here.
Bill?
Good afternoon, Bill Darrow, President of Friends of Cockles Harbor. So I know there's a question seemingly trying to impugn Professor Gobler's independence. We asked at one of these meetings whether the town had hired an independent evaluator. We were told that you have an engineer, so we reached out to more people and found Dr. Gobler. After reading about him in the Shelter Island Reporter and seeing his appearances here at the town board, we recognize that he is the leading expert on water issues in Suffolk County. He spent his entire career working on them in Suffolk County. That's why we hired him, so he can tell us what this project really means. We hired him on an hourly basis. It does not have a success fee. We didn't write a report for him. He did his own report. I have a couple points. I think, sorry, I don't know your last name, Kevin. McAllister made this point. It seems to me it's not just the parts per million. It's the amount of volume coming into Gardner's Creek. Be a lot more wastewater coming into that one spot. So we should be thinking about the total volume of things going in there, not just the parts per million. And I note that my kids, probably everyone else's here's kids, have swam off that bridge there. I'm not sure I'm going to want my kids swimming there after all of this is said and done. I think the math, Ms. Larson, of $250,000 times 7, you add the school is still cheaper than this proposed facility.
It's about $250,000 cheaper.
Okay, but Mr. Lombardo has said that the current budget is not likely to include all of the other things that we may want to add on to this. So I know that Mr. Lombardo said he's liable for certain things. I'm going to ask Mr. Lombardo, is he going to guarantee that the project will come in at the dollar amount that he has suggested here, including his variances? Or are we likely to wake up, like almost every municipal project and government project ends up happening, it being 1.2, 1.5, 2 times the cost? Because that's, in my experience, what happens in government projects.
I think it happens in all projects.
All projects, exactly. So this could easily be a $4 to $5 million project, not a $3.1 million project.
Just real quick, Bill, the main reason that we're not looking at the individual systems is because we're looking at emerging contaminants down the road. And if we did all these individual ones to save $250,000, there's no way we can go forward with with technology to address those with the system we have. That's exactly what was our selling point to the school, that they were going to do this for between $800,000 and $1 million, and they were doing one aspect of it, and one aspect only, nitrates. Because if we're going to do this, let's do it right. Let's see what we need to do and, have the ability to address these issues in the long run.
I understand. My understanding is that IA systems can have filters added on to them to address some of these other things. We spoke to the engineer who designed the project in Orient at the post office, so they have added some filters on that. I also want to go back to the point Mr. Lombardo made. I know that this is a newer thing. We spoke to the town engineer, but capturing urine and repurposing it for other things seems like the smartest thing we should all think about doing. The engineer or the designer of the project in Orient has done a ton of IA systems, and she has been implementing a urine capture approach out here in Suffolk County. And that is the biggest contributor to nitrogen and all these other things is the urine itself.
I would say in my research after we read that one of the benefits is increased density by doing that. It specifically says in the report, one of the main benefits of urine recapturing is you can increase density.
I'm just focused on this issue of water fluoridation itself. And what's the best way to deal with the issue in the center right now? We know the school is the one that produces the most. You talk about bars, we've all, those who have kids, we know what they're doing in school. It's using the restroom. It's usually number 1, not number 2. So if you're able to divert the urine, that is the biggest issue with all of these emerging issues that's coming out of humans' urine, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, and all that stuff.
Thank you.
If I may mention to the board and the public, urine diversion requires that there also be a wastewater treatment system for what's referred to as, let me call it, black wastewater and for gray wastewater. So it doesn't eliminate the need for the wastewater system. Now, it helps in the sense that it reduces the nitrogen loading, but there's still a fair amount of nitrogen in the other wastewater. Urine's typically 50 to 75%, a lot depends. Training depends on diet, et cetera. So any proposal that includes urine diversion needs to also have with it the companion of, okay, how is the rest of the wastewater going to be treated? The other reason why we, let me call it, say, quote, dismissed it was that these buildings sort of are conceived to potentially be a location during a disaster. And that if the system requires that a truck, urine be trucked off island, when you may not even have ferries for a while, for whatever reason, it's, for those reasons.
I don't understand this because we had this issue with Crescent Beach that we wanted to have a tank and take it off. And county says, we don't allow that. We don't want, public sewage transported over the highways.
Yeah. There's issues. And there's nothing wrong with the approach. We like the approach. We just don't think this is the right spot. It's not mature enough for this application. Okay. And again, it's been around it's been seriously studied for over 20 years. And
I would like to see it move faster, but this is, our professional opinion, this is not the right spot.
Right.
Hi, I'm Bob Cohn, and I was interested in, this is not a substantive comment, but interested in the question that Board Member Colligan asked Mr. Gobler about his relationship with the Friends of Cockles Harbor, Inc. I have no relationship with Friends of Cockles Harbor, Inc., even though I'm a friend of Cockles Harbor. But the question to him was, what's the relationship? And he answered the question that he was hired by them, and we just learned that it was suggested that the town hire him as well as an independent consultant, and the town refused to do that. And then he volunteered that he was being compensated for his work. And usually when you ask somebody, have you been compensated and what is your relationship, it has to do with the credibility. I think that everyone basically knows that Mr. Lombardi also is being compensated as well. Is that correct?
Sure.
And you would be, if this project goes forward, you'll have more work to do on this project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the difference between you in terms of credibility and Mr. Gobler in terms of credibility is that if this project goes through or not, he won't make any more money. But if the project goes through, you will. So the public should, in following Jim Colligan's question, should consider the fact of your credibility versus his credibility, and in the way you attacked his credibility by not being an engineer, sure ought to take into consideration that you'll make an awful lot of money if this project goes through.
Well, I would, first of all, we're not mercenary, okay? We're professional engineers, okay? And the town engineer, and I'm sure the supervisor will substantiate that Lombardo Associates is not making money on these projects, okay? This effort here is costing me well in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, just to respond to things that came in at the last second, okay? So, and we're professional engineers that have been hired to do professional engineering work. My comment regarding Mr. Gobler is that he's making a lot of comments regarding engineering that are wrong, okay? And Mr. Gobler is a very smart guy on scientific algebra. We're talking about engineering, okay? And we've got established, okay, as a professional engineer.
I have a minute and 34 seconds.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I'm an attorney, and sometimes I'll get hired to be like an expert witness.
Right.
And if I were, the party can pay me extra money if we win, okay?
That's
But
not
that
what-
would terribly hurt my credibility because they know that I will make more money if the opinion that I provide could be tainted by the fact that I could make more money. That's all I'm saying. I'm not accusing you of nothing in profession. I'm just simply saying the public should take that into consideration. And I'm finished, but unless you have another response.
Amber would like to.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you don't have to, I don't want to go back and forth. I'm gonna respond,
Go
but
ahead.
you don't have to stand there if you don't want.
Oh, I got 57 seconds.
Okay.
Don't let him keep talking.
From the board's perspective, when the request for proposal went out, it was to look at the entire system. And I remember at the time, John Cronin was the town engineer, and he seemed to have a propensity that we would go with a single system. And I kept saying, we need to make sure that the request for proposal evaluates individual on-site systems as well. So when Lombardo Associates was the firm engaged, they had to look at individual systems as well as a single system. So that, from the board perspective, we wanted it to be unbiased. So we felt that we were hiring an unbiased person.
So we went with the most expensive one as opposed to the much cheaper one.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Based on what?
I'm just talking about bias, and I think the comment that was raised, wondering just what Dr. Gobler's motivation was, is if it was a special interest group that was interested in refuting what we were trying to accomplish. So that, just speaking to motivation as to like why we hired, request for proposal, it's supposed to be unbiased. We felt that we have received an unbiased opinion. Dr. Gobler has made some good points, they'll be considered, but the question, I believe, if Jim Colligan can back me up, was just understanding the motivation.
Can I have a milk dud?
You may.
Jim, would you agree with that? As to why you asked that question? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Jim.
Amber, thank you for that last comment. I appreciate that because that's always been on my mind about this word honesty and credibility is, is are we all in it for the right reason? And are we looking at this project and just looking at this project? Or are we looking at this project with the idea that we're looking elsewhere? As a town board, I'm judging this on this merits of this project alone. And the three comments that I wanted to make, I want to applaud Greg Toner's comment about increasing nitrogen flow into Gardner's Bay. But even though Pio, it's only 1.2 houses, I would be, as one board member, not as a town board, but as one board member, would like to see us look to negate that. If it costs us a little bit of extra money in terms of putting in, a couple extra systems there to assure that we're not increasing any flow into that body of water, I would be in favor of that. Peter Grand, I liked your comment about the ability of expanding testing. And I think Mr. Lombardo talked about it's expensive, but it's discretionary, but it can be done. I love the fact that it can be done down the road. Doesn't have to be done now, but it surely is something that is vital to be able to collect that kind of data down the future. And the last person I want to praise a little bit is Ken Peischer's comments, which not just about this system. I think we as a town board have to look bigger than just downtown, the middle of Shelter Island. I think Ken's points of bringing up about the fertilizing and all the other things that can be done, this town board is committed to looking into those possibilities. So I don't see this as a single action. I think this is a tremendous initiative that's going to help in the long run, especially for the people and their health, the people that live in the center of our island. But I do think that our town board is totally committed to reducing nitrogen levels throughout. And we need to move more vigorously, with other initiatives, as Ken has brought up. So I just think that all the comments from Greg, Peter, Ken, and the others have been well taken. I appreciate those as a town board member. And I'm excited about the future of trying to meet these challenges. Thank you.
Anybody else? Bob?
Good afternoon, Mr. Supervisor, members of the town board. My name is Bob DeLuca, and I serve as president of a group for the East End. We were mentioned earlier. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and thank you for hearing me the last time that you were here. I think, it's sort of like, what do you do next with this? And one of the issues I would just offer is, as I did at the last meeting, is, there's 12 criteria that you all need to look at in terms of making a consistency determination with your CPF plan. And that really is a way to validate the concerns that people have raised that are interesting and important. And it gives you an underlying rational basis for the decision that you make. And I think that's like, this dialogue is actually a very healthy and important part of the process. And it may be annoying to sit through, but it's really important because, I spent 7 years trying to get the CPF passed with a lot of other great people. I spent 20 years trying to make sure that the implementation of that with a lot of other great people happened in the right way. I sit on the opinions field trying to figure out nuanced questions about what you can and can't do with the CPF. And the water quality piece is a newer piece that is really starting to get looked at and may end up, seeing more and more money spent that way. So to the extent about disclosure and who I represent, I've really been hanging on to this legislation for like 25 years. And my objective is to try to help everybody who wants to listen figure out how to do it right and well and get the right outcome. So as I said last time, and I'm also on that committee that Pio mentioned at the county. So this project qualified at the county level through the criteria that are in that screening committee for a series of reasons, most of which were trying to improve water quality, okay? That committee doesn't look at the local level. Now, your chapter 50 looks at two different things. The basic criteria is it a wastewater management strategy that basically is consistent with the CPF? We said last time, yes, it is. And then the second thing are these 12 criteria, which you need to look at and essentially check off whether or not they meet those criteria. The ones I think that are most important, some of them have been raised, but I think you really have to look at growth inducement just to see whether what you're designing and its installation over time leads you down a path that you really do have to figure out before you do it or as part of it. And this is like a comprehensive planning issue because, you know, I used to work at the county health department, and once the infrastructure is in the ground, it is much easier for people to come in and tell you that they want to build something and harder to tell them no. And you ought to know how you're going to resolve that in some way. You probably also need to know, you know, the issue about surface water and groundwater protection needs to be resolved, that it can be done in narrative. I mean, you have information now to look at, but that should be answered. The consistency with county plans, Conic Estuary, sub-watershed plan at the county. The point is, there's a road home here, and it's working with your own code and walking through those criteria and answering the questions that have been raised by the public. And then when you do that, you got a rational basis for a decision, which is much less subject to challenge than if you just go, look, we hired somebody, it seemed like a pretty good idea, the other thing didn't seem to work. Some people like it, some people don't like it. You know, it's important that we do the best job we can, and I understand the limitation on time and resources, but I just hope you take my comments in that vein, because that's how they're intended. And I can't seem to get anybody to pay me for anything, so I'm just here as me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Let's say that this idea of a growth inducer, that's really more dependent on installing a water system than a wastewater treatment system. In terms of increasing, we've already been told that this will not allow us to increase density. So I just would like to say that fear should be allayed.
Well, and it also
Right?
has a natural limiting factor in the fact that it's only allowed to be so big.
Yeah.
There's no expansion beyond what we have there, that 1 acre.
Right.
So that in and of itself is a limiting factor
Yeah.
to growth.
Yeah. So
Lisa?
I kind of answered that question in my head.
Lisa Shaw, this question is for Pio. Peter Grand mentioned, and it's been mentioned about emerging contaminants. So my question is to you and to the town, as the technology and the mandates come down the line about testing for emerging contaminants, are we considering how the cost of what building those into the system would be? Are there any projections that we can make if in 5 or 10 years we need to put certain technologies on this system? That's
No, that's a good question. Well, first of all, the technology that's being proposed for nitrogen removal does let me call it, respectable job at dealing with the emergent contaminant, as Chris Gobler even summarized in his presentation. Okay, so anything we're doing is in addition to that. So our base level is to be considering activated carbon as our sort of base option. Activated carbon has a low capital cost or construction cost, but then you've got to replace it periodically. So we haven't made projections of what that would be because there's a number of variables there, and we'll deal with that during design.
I know that the water districts, when they have to put in those systems for PFOAs,
There you go.
they're very costly. So I'm just wondering if down the line, the town is going to look at expenditures that are higher than what are being projected.
Yeah, I mean, the water district, treating for those if you're required to deal with it at high levels of treatment is expensive. Okay, there's no question about that. So we're saying the activated carbon, first of all, we may recommend to the town, hold on, let the technology improve. There's this other technology that's been emerging, it's called electrochemical, that's relatively low cost, that is, it's coming out of the gates, if you will. So if we would expect that may be viable or mature within 5 years, okay? So that's one of our considerations. The activated carbon is, okay, if we want to do something now, that's probably what we would recommend. To do the other ones, which is mainly going to be either an ozone-based system or UV system, it's going to add money, but the ozone system is like $50,000, okay? So is that going to be, that's not going to break the bank, okay? So we've already been talking with suppliers about those, and we're leaning towards the ozone system if we get to that point. for a variety of reasons, but it's not that complicated. I mean, not that expensive. Skid mounted unit, you put it in, et cetera. Now, there are concerns with bromate, using ozone on the bromate can cause carcinogenic compounds, and bromate is in seawater. Bromide is in seawater. And so we would need to do some testing. And that would be, and frankly, that'll be in the water supply. So we would do that as we go into design. So we've got plenty of budget to deal with those things depending on where we go.
Okay, because a lot of the readings, especially the EPA and what they're coming out with, are that many water treatment procedures are not effective in removal of these emerging and forever contaminants. So I'm just saying that I think we need to think about that going forward, that expenditure will come down.
Lisa, I think one of the, well, maybe the main reason that the board supports this project is to be able to address future contaminants.
Right. And frankly, that was one of the points that we.
Okay, just address them financially or have the ability to add on?
To add on to the system, if and when.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and that was one of our, let me call it, plans and requirements right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, because, on the PFOAs, the EPA guidance is 0, it's the guidance level. Okay, and we know from other testing that septic tank effluent is usually in the 50 parts per trillion level. So, and it's challenging to get rid of it. It's not easy. So
I think I just want to bring it to the attention of the public that this cost could be coming down. It will be coming down the line.
Right, right.
About it. And my last question is very quick, but we talk about the one well, the one house that'll be affected. So my question is, how are we protecting that one house? Is there a plan? Are we addressing that?
Well, here's the issue about the one well. First of all, we're upgrading from the well, upstream from the well. There's all sorts of water and other properties nearby, okay? We don't know if we're going to impact that well. To know is a very involved process, not inexpensive, okay? Remember that well has what we call colon depression where it pulls water in from. So the question is, are we going to hit that? And then the other part of the question is, if we do hit it, what percent of the water supply that's going to that property is wastewater derived from our property? Okay? And what the answer to that's the way we ask the question and answer it. And there's other and what we're saying, just to put things in context, is that there's a lot of other factors right near there. Not to diminish the concern about the well, but.
So will there be testing made on this well specifically to sort of suss out all of this information?
Yeah, we can talk. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Yeah, just to deal with it. We'll be happy to.
It would seem you would want outreach to the homeowner.
I think in discussions Joe and I have had was, if and when we have to replace the well, we would test it and make sure.
Yeah, they can relocate the well.
So publicly, the town board is saying, yes, we will take care of that.
Right.
We will be aware, right, we'd stay on top of it, yes.
Yeah, frankly, as an initial thought, sample it now. It'd be interesting to see what the data tells us. We're not there, so to speak. So, but I'm glad you brought it up. So should there be a negative impact, the project will pay for relocating the well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Anybody else? Chris?
Just want to make a final point. Supervisor, you just said before that the IA systems would be less expensive than the proposed project. Right? I did the math as well. You said 250,000, I got 500,000. We'll call it equal. Just want to say, when I gave my presentation, when I said that, I was dismissed, that I was wrong, that it was cheaper. But you just acknowledged that it is cheaper. That estimate of it being cheaper by between 250,000 and 500,000 is if all the other buildings cost $250,000 each. Now, the post office that was done on Main Street in Orient was much less than that. I believe the cost was $50,000. And so if it's $50,000, that would, as per my argument that I made during my presentation, would leave the town with $2 million extra to upgrade other IA systems. So I think it's, instead of just, since you've already admitted that the IA systems, or stated, that the IA systems replacement would be cheaper, and that's under the very high estimate, or just the high range estimate of 250,000, it would be worthwhile asking that engineer of record, I can give that information, and maybe just getting a ballpark of what it would be.
Chris, I think the main point is we're trying to really hit the big picture. Future contaminants, nitrates in the center of town.
Right.
And our understanding from the town engineer, from our hired consultant, is that the IA systems just won't do it.
Well, I just think on a cost and total nitrogen amount.
We're looking for the best bang for our buck. We're not gonna settle for the cheapest.
Well, I think.
And not just nitrogen.
Yeah, agreed, but I think looking at, taking a clear-eyed view of the cost savings and a number of additional systems that could be upgraded, since it would be cheaper for the IA systems, again, if you want to hit the nitrates, more systems would get you more nitrate removal. So just a point, because again, when I made that statement during my presentation, I was told, no, that's not the case, but clearly we're now all on the same page. That is the case. And so anyway,
But Chris, we do feel that IA systems are the ideal thing for like the vast majority of the island. It would be difficult to do these kinds of systems. The municipal context gives us the opportunity, and the fact that it's on the backbone. And I believe that the data that we've been quoting is not really up to date. The latest USGS studies show that along that ridgeline, along that hydrological center that runs from the town hall to the IGA, we're talking about not 50 years, but 100 years, 200 years travel time, just in that very narrow ridgeline. So we have sort of an urgency about dealing with this municipal center, and we just happen to be lucky that the municipal center is where it is at. But in the vast majority of places, I mean, somebody said at some point, Shelter Island is not one size fits all. And we know that in the vast majority of places, the cost-effective solution is going to be putting in individualized IA systems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard?
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Johansson. I'm just here on the basis of being a citizen of the island. I listened to all this about the nitrates. Now, understand that if you put in a central sewage system, you get 1 milligram of nitrate per liter or less, they try.
Well, I would say, go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is the beginning. The idea that we are putting in 3 milligrams is way above what the county limits are for a sewage treatment system. And along the perimeters, we're putting in IA systems of 12 milligrams, which is flowing right into our surface waters. It's not going anyplace else, it's 12 milligrams, which is way above what the professor here and you say, hearing anyway. So are we really just delaying a time that we have to put in a central sewage system? I think that's what we're doing now. It might be economical to do that, but we have to realize it's a comprehensive plan. It's the same with our water systems. We know our water is going to go bad. There's no doubt eventually with the salt water intrusion. And we have to think about doing like West Neck Water did. And those two, and we're not going to solve it here. We're not going to solve it in my lifetime. But we should have that as part of a comprehensive plan to think about those two important systems.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll just. I was hesitant to speak today, but I'll just, Kevin, you inspired me with your positive comments.
Okay. Just identify yourself.
Oh, Kate Rossi Snook, and I guess I should be clear that I, at this point, have a few different roles in the community, and I'm speaking today as a resident who served for 5 years as a voting member on the East Hampton Town Water Quality Improvement Advisory Committee. Kevin sat on there with me for a little bit, along with Pete Topping from my last year, who was referenced in some of the articles. And I just want to say that I support this project. I thought it was maybe a better part of the year that it was first discussed, but maybe it's been over a year already. And so I've had, because I was part of early conversations regarding this system, I've had more time to think about it, I guess. Also with regards to, the school starting their conversations about the needs to upgrade their systems even long before the town started talking about this project. And I think that at this point, it needs to be done. That we all should be doing what we could be doing to upgrade our personal systems, support upgrading municipal system, and doing everything we can to make a positive impact, including reducing pesticides and fertilizers. Very good. And I guess I would just say that, while my knowledge of the nitric system is not to the degree that Kevin has, I do understand more of the IA systems. So correct me if I'm wrong in this assumption, but one of the problems with the performance of IA systems is fluctuations in use. You don't get as good a performance from the IA systems when you have large dips and spikes in use. For example, a school closing in the summertime, even though that is very much used as a community center throughout the year, the use does go down in the summertime. If systems are linked, you get more of an even keeled usage and flow and input for treatment. And I think that's just another argument for linking these buildings together. And the conversation was going on for a while, and I think we should move forward. That's what I say.
And that's an argument for community systems as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I'm Erica Laspia. I'm a neighbor of the proposed plant. And I just want to express to the board that I have grave concerns about the system. There's a lot of information that's been brought up. I don't feel the board is considering it deeply. I felt a certain pushback and attitude, which I, as a town member, feel embarrassed by. There are a lot of people here that care. We care about our water. We also care about all the other repercussions of this system. We know, most of us here, that potential expansion underlies the motivations for this area. We know that. We know why Sylvester Manor has given their okay without even looking or considering this in depth. It's supposedly organic, even though they're not certified organic. They certainly purport and endorse that system in their fields, yet they are able to just, without the least bit of consideration, go along with potential concentrated wastewater being put into their fields. If that doesn't seem suspicious to anybody, I would be incredibly surprised. But we know they want to expand into the system. That is part of what we feel, those of us who are gathered here today. We're worried about the motivations beyond cleaning up our water, which obviously we all agree with. But I just want to express my opinion to you.
Erica, just to put it on the record, the only expansion the town board has ever talked about was the expansion for future contaminants, for filtering future contaminants.
You've talked about expansion within that lot, and that's part of why you wanted to use that lot. So you could potentially expand in that lot.
Expand for other uses. In other words, for PFAS, for
And
pharmaceuticals.
we know that it can potentially accommodate more people using the water.
Okay, but
That's
we don't fail to clean up our water because we don't.
I'm
want
not
more people.
asking not to clean up the water. I just wanted to express those feelings to you.
Thank you, Eric.
As somebody that lives next door.
Turn it on.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to put my notebook down for a second and speak on behalf of Sylvester Manor. I'm going to speak just briefly on behalf of Sylvester Manor. What Sylvester Manor did was there was a request.
You're on the board?
I'm on the board of directors. What Sylvester Manor did at the point when the town was putting out this proposal for grants, it asked some of the large institutions that are partner institutions, is it a supporter of its general idea of this wastewater treatment plant? It did not, because it did not exist, review all of the documentation and all of that. It was more a general, are you in favor of the town of Shelter Island looking into this kind of system and pursuing grant money for it? And the answer was, of course, we thought it was a worthwhile thing to pursue. But there was no endorsement on the part of Sylvester Manor at all for this. It was more for the original grant, they paid for the design and other things. That's my understanding.
Yep.
Good.
No, that's not good.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Gordon? Gordon?
No,
Gordon?
no.
I didn't plan to speak, okay, but I'm talking as a resident of the island. I think good dialogue is important, okay, and I guess I'm gonna give a little speech on my little box here, okay, but I think this is really important. I think there really should be a thank you that we did have some concerned citizens that brought somebody out and spent some money, and that we can really get into some depth and the whole community can look at this information, the board can look at it, and everything becomes completely transparent. And this is good conversation, okay? And I think this is what we need to do. What was going through my mind as I was listening to you talk about, Payo, about the up in New England and so forth, there is much more we can do. And I said this when I got on the Community Preservation Board and when the WQIP was first created. I really wanted to adopt some of the philosophies and some of the inner workings that are going on in Nantucket, the Vineyard, and the Title V's, all that stuff with title changes. When we change titles of properties, what better time? And I don't think anybody can argue with me over that. I mean, particularly I have two smart people here today, that what better time to look at your septics than when you have a title change on the house?
That's right.
Okay, so we got this little issue here, boy, but there's so much more we can do. Okay, and I would just ask the board to really look, not necessarily just here, but look at the water issue as an entire island. Okay, but I think this dialogue is important. It's not, there's no self-serving here, okay? This is one of, we should be doing this with everything that we're dealing with in terms of water and land preservation and all those other things. I think there were some really great comments here, but title change is something that I think that we should implement. If we can implement and get a sewer district, why can't we do a title? And I don't think you would argue with me over that, that the title.
On the
change-
contrary.
I'm sorry?
On the contrary.
Right,
We would
exactly,
say.
okay. So, thank you for your time.
Yeah, just so you know, that was established in 1997, if I recall, in Massachusetts.
But if you combine the two things.
Well, it's great entitled because there's money moving around.
Exactly, and if you do this, it's not just the center, we're really improving the water and the bays, everything that's going on. So I think it's something that you should really clearly look at. Thank you.
Yeah, the other issue that Massachusetts is going to require, let me call it Cape Cod and those kind of communities, is they have to either have a plan that they're going to implement over at most a 20-year period, or upgrade all their septic systems within 5 years.
Right. Well, they've changed even
So they're-
Time, but they've changed even how we do even septic systems. I mean, the amount of ground below the septic, they've changed it to 6 feet. We're still dealing with 2 feet. In a peninsula area on the island, we're gonna put, some of the stuff that there's lots that we can do. So it's not a single thing here, okay? Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, I just like to respond to your comment regarding the Sylvester Manor support. So Sylvester Manor did.
Direct it to the board.
Sorry?
Direct it to the board, please.
Yes. So the Sylvester Manor did support this application for 250,000 grant from Suffolk County. So this was not just for the engineering. I'm sorry?
You're correct, that's right.
Yes. There's a letter in this application dated from July 13 supporting this, okay? So this letter was also used to specify in this application that there is great community support for this plant, okay? And there were 2 other boxes to check, no opposition or opposition, okay? So now we know that there are parties who are concerned about this. There are others who couldn't be here because the meeting is during the working day and they're working. For example, Charlie Galuccio, I had to step out, so I don't know if you mentioned him or. So there are a number of neighbors who are concerned about the location of this plant, okay? They never had the chance to even voice their opposition because when the town changed location from Glenavicus to 16 Manwaring Road, okay? No public hearing was called, okay? And therefore, they never even had the chance to express the concern.
We've had this discussion numerous times at public work sessions.
Yeah.
Anybody can come and talk. There hasn't been a public hearing on it because we're not at that stage.
I mean, you just changed location from Glenavicus Airport, okay? Neighbors didn't like
We
it.
didn't have a public hearing on that either. It was discussion in a town work session.
Well, in any case, those people who are neighbors.
They have more than ample opportunity to come and speak to us.
I reached out to Charlie.
Yes, and?
I'm just saying, he had opportunity to come to talk, to email, and
You did express your concern, didn't you?
Pardon me?
Charlie Galuccio did express his concerns about this location.
Yeah, just to me, but I said, come and.
Okay, so the application here says that there is no opposition to it. As a matter of fact, there's a great support.
That conversation happened after my discussion with Charlie.
And the only supporter.
What's the date of the application?
July 18, 2022.
Yeah, I think my discussion was after that.
So basically, what I'm trying to say is that this application misrepresents situation because you're claiming there's a great community support for it, but there's a number of neighbors who are concerned, and therefore you should amend that application at the very least, and to reflect the current situation.
We'll take it under advisement. Thank you. Last chance, anybody else? Okay.
I just want to put this into a little bit of context, just to refresh my recollection, and I believe the recollection of the community. There's a time frame here that we're trying to adhere to, right? Joe?
For the school.
Yeah, you want to just address that real quick to what we're looking at and why this is urgent?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so the history of this project is that the school had years ago agreed to participate in a community-based project where we would be interlinking these buildings. Subsequent to that conversation, the town, different administration, decided not to pursue the project. And so the school was sort of abandoned to do this septic solution on their own. They pursued that project to a certain point. That's the $800,000 project that's been in discussion today. As they got to the design phase of their project, the town was awarded funding to pursue the design and development of a connected or to explore a municipal wastewater solution that could have been either individual systems or a combined centralized system. And at that time, the town revisited that conversation with the school to say, we have secured the funding to do this project. We recognize that you're further along in your project as an individual entity, but we recognize that the cost is significant, and we believe that in partnership, we can offer a lower cost solution for your septic problems and allow the town to consider a centralized system as well. The centralized system sort of has a critical mass in that you need a certain amount of flow to make the economies of scale work. So removing big pieces like the school or a number of other buildings within the system lower the total amount that the centralized system has, and therefore you lose the efficiency that you gain with combining the infrastructure. The school said, wow, that's, appreciate the opportunity to reconsider this. Yes, that's correct. We are looking at about $1 million project, and we are using technology that's not well established for this application, although the designers felt that it could be done, and they lack the ability to, or the flexibility to pivot and change and modify over the long term. This is an infrastructure project that has a lifespan of decades, and so the idea that a centralized system could offer them varying degrees or interchangeable levels of treatment as either the wastewater characteristics and profile change or the requirements change for treatment. It may be such that in 10 or 20 years, we recognize that we have a contaminant in our water that we didn't know, or there's now a contaminant in our water that we are forced to treat. The ability to do so in a centralized system is much more enhanced. And so the school took that opportunity to table their $800,000 project in an effort to join in one centralized system for a better overall project. And the timeline that we're referencing is that portions of their existing system are considered to be failed. That doesn't mean that there's a big hole in the ground, but it means that their system is compromised and there's a limited window before they will catastrophically fail and will need to be replaced. So there is no hard deadline. We don't know exactly what that risk is, if it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. We're operating within the margin of error of anything that could be calculated. But that is ultimately the deadline and the target that we're trying to accommodate, is that the school has failing systems. They have a plan to implement an individual system if they need to, and we're trying to beat that. We're trying to make it so that they don't have to put in their individual system because their existing system failed. And that's the guiding timeline for this project. And we communicate regularly with the school administrators to keep them abreast of project progress on our own, and also to understand what constrictions or restrictions or constraints that they're having. So right now we are aligned well with their timeline for replacement in this combined project, and we're trying to not have them go down that route. That's more expensive for the taxpayer and also offers a lower value for treatment and reduced flexibility for treatment in the future.
Thanks, Joe. Pam Demers, I see you're on.
Yeah. Hi there, Supervisor. Actually, I do have a question, I guess, for you, just because you mentioned the public hearing. So I know there is a timeline associated with this project, and I wondered if the town board has an idea of when that public hearing might be about this project. I was also wondering if you were going to have PW Grosser do the state environmental assessment requirement review for this project. And I also wondered about what the story was with the library, because I know one of the last work sessions about this project was that the library was going to do expansion, and that had come into play on the discussion.
Let's start with the beginning. I'm not sure when we're going to set a public hearing. Ready yet?
The public hearing that we had is for the expenditure of WQI funds to do the second phase of engineering.
Pam's asking the next.
So that's still open, but that's very specific to use of WQI money. As far as executing a contract, I guess I have to flip to you, Stephen, where
are we with Grosser on this?
I guess if we had to do.
I believe we passed a resolution to retain them.
We did.
Yeah.
We retained that,
Yeah, so for
We have the environmental
We
group.
do have the environmental.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so that piece
To do it.
is done.
Pam, what was
So
the
wait,
third question?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. So does that mean that PW Grosser will be doing the?
Yes, we passed a resolution authorizing the supervisor to enter into a contract with PW Grosser to do the secret review of this proposed wastewater treatment facility. In connection with that, there may be opportunities for public hearings independent of whatever public hearing you have to have in connection with the ultimate approval of the wastewater treatment facility. You'll have a public hearing potentially upon the secret review process.
Right, I understand that. Okay, okay. And then I just wondered about the library. That was the other thing. What was the story with that, the expansion on the library? Because I know there was a question about that. You were going to talk to the folks over there.
I'm not sure where we are with that. Are we at that stage yet, that the library's talking about a potential expansion?
Well, we're,
So the library is a great example of the expansion that we've been talking about with the system. Shortly after we started the analysis, the library approached us to say they have renovation plans of their own. And I think it's important to distinguish how we talk about system expansion. These being municipal buildings that are serviced by whatever treatment system is ultimately selected, means that they have to be able to provide service to the community as the community's needs change. The library is a great example of that. All of these municipal buildings now have what's considered to be non-conforming septic systems. If the library, or any building for that matter, was to consider an expansion or even just a change of use, change of seating at the Legion Hall, that would have huge implications on its required septic system. And so when we look at these solutions for either a centralized system or an independent on-site system, we have to consider the changing needs of the community and the functionality of those municipal buildings. Meg mentioned before, the long-term implications of what happens at town hall or what happens at the school. That's already happening right now. The library has established that through the COVID closures, they were a necessary resource for the community in providing mobile office space and internet connectivity and place for children to do their at-home learning. And they've heard that need from the community and decided that they needed to invest in expanding their facilities. That type of expansion with individual systems or with an existing non-conforming system requires extensive, very expensive, and potentially handcuffing restrictions on that facility. The library, if they had just invested in a, call it $300,000 or $400,000 system equivalent to say what the school had used, they would now be less inclined, or perhaps it's not possible for them to offer that new expansion because they've just expended that much money for their individual system, just like the school. If for whatever reason the school does move with their individual system, they spend $800,000 or $1 million to do that work, and 10 years from now, there's a dramatic change in use where the required flow goes up or goes down. If it goes up, that system would no longer function. There would be a need to modify or replace, substantially replace, which could come at such a cost that you may not elect to do. My point that I'm trying to drive home is the library is already doing that now. As we were working on this analysis, the library has indicated that they need to provide more services for the community. So in picking our ultimate solution, we need to make sure that we are engineering something that accommodates the needs of the community. And that largely, if not exclusively, has been what we reference as expansion, a change of use of an existing municipal building that now puts out more flow than was originally calculated to do. So that's considered an expansion of the wastewater system. And that's something that I think is critically important to the town board as a consideration, because these are buildings that serve the public.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I'd like to just say something quickly. I'm Sarah Ward. I'm here with my husband, Mark Massey, and we live on Winthrop Road, and we are very concerned about directing the effluent to Gardner's Creek. I mean, it's a small tidal creek that does not flush well. It is a very narrow inlet, and we don't feel like, at least we have not heard enough in terms of what environmental studies have been done to determine the impact of directing the effluent into this creek. So we'd like the board to consider one of these alternative plans, or at a minimum to reroute the effluent to the Sound or some other larger body of water that perhaps would not result in such a severe environmental negative impact.
Sarah, I just want to make sure you understand. It's been mentioned a couple times, diverting it to the Sound. We're not pumping the water into Goddard's Creek. It's going to gradually, mutate there over time. To get it to the Sound, I think people are thinking we should put the water like the Heights treatment plant does, treat it and put it in the Sound. That's not feasible for what we're trying to do.
No. Well, first of all, it'll be very expensive to pipe it to a location. The standard practices, we're not going to get a direct discharge permit. It has to go to the land. So then we got to find a parcel of land on which it would get into the ground. And ideally, that would be the best place to go, where you get that flushing action. But naturally, that comes at a cost. So I would suggest, just like the cost benefit discussions have been held this afternoon, is it wiser to take that additional cost and do some remediation with existing systems discharging into Gardeners Creek rather than this? I would expect one could get a heck of a lot better bang for the dollar by doing something like that.
I think our only comment really is just, has a full assessment been done in terms of the environmental impact of discharging into Gardeners Creek? I mean, I've not seen an environmental study. I've read Dr. Gobler's report. I've read as much material as is available. I've not seen an environmental study, and I am concerned about the impact on, this area generally.
Well, we will add, if we can add a environmental impact analysis to Gardeners Creek. It's as an amendment, it's a pretty simple thing to do. Again, on a big picture perspective, but again, as we've been talking about, the proposed discharge into Gardeners Creek watershed is a small fraction of what's going on there currently. And I think the board's going to support the suggestion that we turn the project into net positive nitrogen removal. So the project is not having a negative impact from a nitrogen discharge perspective. So, and that could be done for well under $100,000. And so that's the way that we would recommend to the town as to how to deal with that. And again, we can look at the watershed and we can do a quick, environmental impact. But what it's going to show is that there's a lot of other discharges in that area, and they're not treating anything above what a septic system does. And so.
Yeah, we are aware, actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. We actually are aware of other discharges into this area. And, we have off of our dock tried to grow oysters. And we've been told that we can't eat the oysters because of the contaminants in the bay. So we're living it, and we understand what happens when, effluent is discharged into this area. So we would really appreciate a full environmental review to be sure that if this goes forward, it's not going to cause brown tides. It's not going to, otherwise negatively impact the area from an environmental perspective.
Again, the short answer, immediate, is that the project is going to take out more nitrogen from the watershed than it's going to discharge. So the impact from a nitrogen perspective is positive. There's no negative impact. Mm-hmm. And so, but we understand if that's the case, what you're telling me anyways, is that the current discharges in that area are a problem.
Excuse me, you can take it outside, because I can't.
So, thank you for your comments.
Yeah, really. Thanks.
Okay. Peter?
I just wanted to sort of second that concern about Gardiner's Bay. And Chris had also, Dr. Gobler had also described, some of the problems with Gardiner's Bay itself and the restrictions on flushing in that area. And it seems to me that would be something that the Water Advisory Committee would actually take seriously as something to like focus on and think about what would be the appropriate remediation in that area, how to reduce discharge in that area, and also how perhaps to increase tidal flushing in that area. So I would just encourage you to think about that as a community, as a sort of as a project, as a thing that an area that can be improved, rather than thinking about all the harmful impacts that are potentially coming down the pike toward you. Because I think that what we're trying to communicate is that we hear you, and this project is intended to, at least in part, remediate the very thing you're concerned about.
Yeah, no, I do hear what you're saying in terms of nitrates, but I would just, I'm just repeating myself. I would just like to see a full environment.
No, we should study the hell out of this thing. We really need to be reviewing it thoroughly. We absolutely get that.
And we did authorize me to sign a contract with JW Grosser, PW Grosser, to do a full environmental assessment for us. So we are doing that. Penny Kerr?
Yeah, all of this I think has really been a wonderful discussion. I just have, and I'm glad to know everyone's concerned about nitrates. I'm a little concerned about pharmaceuticals. When you're bringing in a number of people's waste product into one area, you're really expanding the number of people that are using meds that are in material. So I hope that whatever systems we end up with really address pharmaceuticals, and like Lisa was talking about, the OFAs and these other contaminants that really concern me personally. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up on this one.
I have one. Yes, there's been a fair amount of discussion and suggestions that, gee whiz, the individual systems would be more cost effective. So I thought here's a quick analysis, a comparison that I did that I think shed some light. As Joe was saying, the school system, if it was done on its own, would be $1 million plus, okay? We showed in one of our tables that associated with the higher nitrogen removal with the treatment system that we're proposing, that is the equivalent of, round numbers, 21 IA systems being installed on the island, okay? And because the proposed system is going to remove more nitrogen, okay? So that's the reason it's 21 systems. Now, if we take, for discussion purposes, $40,000 for the cost of an IA system, not only construction costs, but engineering, surveying, all the other soft costs, that says that we have a benefit associated with this of round numbers, $800,000, okay? So one can look at it and says, wait a minute. On its own, it would be $1 million for the school. We're really creating a benefit because the school and the other IA technology are not going to get below 10 for sure. I mean, I think it's reasonable. So, and so that says that if one uses the 3.1 million, that she was to do the rest of the properties, the net there is about 1.3 million. Okay, and that doesn't escalate the school cost, anything. So we're talking, and then of that 1.3 million, we have close to $500,000 there of contingency funding. So when we scrape it all down, we're now talking about in the neighborhood of $600,000 is really associated with dealing with all the other properties beyond except the school. And we can ask the question, wait a minute,
could you do those other properties for $600,000? If you can, you're not going to save that much money. And it's not going to be that much less. So in terms of cost effectiveness, that's the way we do, and that's the way it's done by EPA's techniques that we frankly have to help them develop. So again, I wanted to put that in front of the board that the claim is being made, without any details that, oh, gee whiz, we can do it less expensive with IAs. This technique that we're using is cost effective, according to that, let me call it analysis. So I thought it would be enlightening.
Let me ask you this. When we did the expansion of the school in the 90s, the architect came in and gave us the plans and says, this is what it's going to cost. And Cliff Clark, one of the board members, insisted, let's get somebody outside to validate this.
Right.
And they came in, and that's why there's no basement in the school. He said, you can't do it for this price.
Sure.
So if you come in, if we just, approve the, moving forward, get all this done, you come in with a plan, we can get an outside estimator to.
Absolutely. No, and as a matter of fact, we would prefer it.
Mhm.
And because it's an ever-changing, arena. And, you're in a unique situation because now you got to bring workers here. And they got to come in the ferry. And, for instance, when we did our work in Montauk, we threw in a Montauk factory because to get people to come over. And as a matter of fact, I talked to contractors about that. And what they would do is frankly rent houses for their workers because the commute is horrible.
Yeah.
And so, but we would propose to have a third party, and frankly, for our own benefit, and because it's the cost estimating is very challenging. Now, to the point of how, let me call it reliable our numbers are, the way that one evaluates it in standard engineering, you start looking at our unit cost because the quantities are fixed. I mean, somebody can double check the quantities. That's easy. Okay. So the real linchpin is, did we include everything that's associated with the project? Did we miss something? And it's in the appendix and all the details there. So anybody critiquing the cost really should be critiquing that table. Okay. And then if you look at the unit cost, we frankly use pretty high unit costs. We've got unit costs in there, if I remember right, $150 to $200 a foot. Now, that's high. In my experience, that's high. That's for a conventional system that's put under the road. So you're paying for road restoration. And that's the thing that we're very focused on, is not to have this turn into a road project. Okay.
And just so the public understands, we're not talking the huge pipes that the county puts in or something, because what we're talking about is the fluid.
That's right. What we're talking about here, thank you for bringing that up. We got a combination gravity and pressurized system. The gravity system is 4-inch pipe, okay? And the pressurized system, I forget the real detail, it's like 2 inches. So our goal is frankly to have that pipe put in the shoulder of the road. And that's how we avoid the road cost. Because again, road cost doubles a project. And it's not a wastewater project, it's a road project. And so that's where I was saying earlier, the design details really become the critical factor. If we put that pipe in the middle of the street, it'll double the cost. It'll double the cost. And $150 a foot for putting a pipe in the shoulder is high. It's high. I mean, our experience, it should be 80, right? It should be under $100 a foot. So, because I'll assure you, as you can tell, I've been around a bit, but I don't want to win the bid.
Yeah.
If you've heard that term.
Yep.
Engineer does not want to win the bid. So we're highly motivated to make sure it's a budget and not to be exceeded.
Take 1 minute of comments. My name is Kim Nolan. I really appreciate all the hard work that this board does, but I would seriously request you to do before you commit additional CPFWQIP funds to engineering studies on this project, I would like to have you do the cost benefit analysis required under Chapter 50, Section 33. Secondarily, I would echo the comments of people who are concerned about Gardner's Creek. And I would really like for you to do the environmental analysis with an independent expert on that also before you commit more funds. Thank you.
Excuse me, what is your definition of independent expert?
Whatever.
In other words, we put it,
there.
well, we put a request for proposal, and we got it.
I really do think that you guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate it. I want you to understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Gonna move on with the rest of the meeting. Thank you. Next on the agenda is board member reports. Ed?
I'm pretty sure I'm good, but you know, you need to come back.
Take a break? Yeah. Yeah, we'll take a break so everybody can leave if they want to leave.
Make a motion to go into recess.
Yeah, to
Make a motion, we went to recess?
Yes.
Why do I have to make a motion? It's a work session, it's not an official meeting.
It's still a meeting.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion, we recess.
Okay, I second that motion to
All those in
recess.
favor?
Yeah.
Just makes it clear for the record and the minutes and.
Stand up with us.
Okay, oh, you got it for me?
I got you.
Oh, what a, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, but
You guys must be busy, huh? You said, not going.
Oh, yeah, that's on.
It's on. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna reconvene the meeting for board member reports.
Yeah, so you were,
Did you have anything?
you were a no?
I do not have anything. I was not here most of last week.
Okay, all right, because we didn't do around the table last week, I can pick up the West Newton. You want to do that all the time? There was a meeting on September 30th, and one of the questions that was raised then, that has subsequently been answered from that meeting was the access fee. There was a little bit of confusion between what I thought the access fee was billed on to customers and what Joe Carney thought the access fee was being used for. That there was going to be an additional access fee on top, but the access fee that Western customers are being billed incorporates no additional access to be coming. And that will be explained. There's going to be a letter going out to all Western Water District members to, one, explain that so that they understand that they're not looking at additional charges. And also the billing, because they went from twice a year billing on the access fee to quarterly. So this quarter, it looked like last year that their bills went up substantially. But if you level out the year,
Right.
the quarter.
The next one will be,
Yes.
you know, the
Well,
region
yeah.
one that we use instead of paying the whole lot.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Yes, correct. So I'm gonna help the house write something, so. So
Has to be yellow.
that was West Neck Water. And then,
Not much happens.
yeah, I guess, there was a question about whether or not that has to be looked at for Fresh Pond, whether or not the operational costs would come from WQI or whether or not that would be a budget.
If it's, and there was a discussion on whether or not it's truly operational.
Right, 'cause
Or
it's
is
a
it your,
short-term
right,
project, so-
right.
But that's something that I think they're gonna look at, but we may also want to just double check with Stephen.
Right, wasn't there discussion that that could be included in the grant money, like the grant might cover the operational cost because it is short term?
Yeah.
Right, because it's not really ongoing
Right.
maintenance of the system.
Right.
It's a specific
yeah.
project that was
Yeah.
short lived.
So how do we find out the answer?
We just, we need to bring Joe in because he wasn't at that meeting and also just double check with Stephen and the legislation.
We'll review it.
So that's that. And on Saturday, we have 3:00.
3:00,
3:00, the.
school, at the
meeting,
school.
Yes. As I say, 3:00 at the school, the housing meeting. So, just people,
Everybody in the community.
yes,
So we're gonna have,
it's going to be,
the housing board, the, consultant we hired to,
who wrote the housing
who
plan?
wrote the housing plan,
Fred Thiel.
Red Deal, and, we haven't,
Mediator.
no, but aren't we having a, we have a.
Facilitator.
Facilitator. Yeah, to help in the
Are we
meeting.
having a consultant, the housing consultant or anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who wrote the plan?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yes, so they will all be there. And it's going to be, you can ask questions in person. It will be live streamed, but there's no ability to participate from via remote, like to ask questions. You can email in questions, but you have to, like you can't. It's not a live exchange, just so people understand. So hopefully people will come if they wanted to speak in person. Get involved in the conversation.
Okay, anything else?
That's all that I have.
AJ? No? Steve, do you have anything?
No, Mr. Supervisor.
Do you have anything for us?
No, thank you.
Okay. Open it up
What am
to,
I, chopped liver here?
oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you were there. Jesus.
Well, no, I've been here for the last 3 hours and 15 minutes.
No board reports.
He's not on vacation.
Oh, yeah, wait, yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Karen,
He's caregiving, so he.
The only comment I have is I have been, and I've sent the Recreation Committee some sketches I've done on, looking at a possible new rec center. So Jerry, I think you've received that, right? That floor plan that I put together. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done about it, but I'm pretty excited about it. You know, we have a plan of attack once I get home, how we're going to proceed on that. But it's going to take some time, obviously, which it should. But it should be it should be pretty exciting, I think. And I think some of the concepts that we have in there will be excellent. But I think the committee's excited about it. Obviously, we know that the recreation center eventually will have to be moved out of the school. So this is an idea of just getting this plan up and ready to go. Get some professional drawings done, exactly what we're looking for, possibilities of where we would locate it, and a cost analysis on the thing as well. So I think it has some great possibilities. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else? Bob?
I came for the chopped liver.
Plenty to go around.
First, on the forum on Saturday, I had a discussion with the town attorney this morning, and he assured me that there wouldn't be a 3-minute limitation for people willing to talk. There are a lot of people who are opposed to the referendum who are afraid to come forward. You know, people being, as the former supervisor said, or former town board members said, that people have been vilified. I'm one of those, I think, but that's okay. So I would appreciate the opportunity, if I'm there, if I can make it, to have reasonable amount of time, but not an excess amount of time.
Yeah, there's other people. That's the only reason.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the facilitator is just there to make sure the meeting runs smooth. So.
And there's no one on the.
There's no time.
And there's no one on the panel that would be opposed to the referendum, is there?
We don't know what their person.
The panel is the community house.
Stop interrupting Bob Cohn.
Wait.
Sorry.
I am asking
Mute him,
questions.
will you please, Christine?
No, don't mute, Ken.
The reason, it's an informational meeting. It's not a pro and con meeting. It's informational.
Oh, so
about. I would assume. Yes.
I thought it was a forum where the
It
opportunity.
is a forum, and if you have a question, you get up and you ask it, and the people up there will answer it.
Will I be interrupted if I already have the answers from the board? What I'm trying to do is.
No, but I assured you, you can.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anybody can express, it's an opportunity for the people to be heard and ask questions.
Okay, thank you.
And the facilitator specifically knows that once you've made your point, there's no beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
Make your point and move on.
Yeah, okay. The second thing is that a number of, there are signs around town regarding the housing referendum. There's vote yes and there's vote no. I've put up personally and paid for a number of vote no signs. Within hours, and especially a couple of days, many of those signs have been taken out by people who were just taking signs out.
Can I ask where you put them?
Where I put them?
Yeah.
I put them, generally, I tried to put them right next to where the October 15th breast cancer pink signs were.
So you put them on town property?
I put them on town property, which is perfectly legal.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
All right, let's.
It is. First of all, I went to the police before I put the signs up and showed them the town code. And we also discussed the law. And according to the US Supreme Court in all the cases, you can prohibit signs on town property, but they have to be content neutral. You can't allow a breast cancer sign and not allow a political sign. So you can do that, but the code doesn't. The only thing code says is if a temporary sign like an election sign or a tag sale sign has to be removed within 24 hours of the event. That's the law. So you don't have that right. So I had every purpose.
Can I just chime in? Yeah, stop the clock.
Thank you. Something else more important.
I set it back to 30 seconds.
Yes, give them 30 seconds. Yes, our sign code has some issues. But
it's the law, right?
No, it is the law.
Yeah.
No, and I didn't draft it. It's 133.27, and if you look at B, And if you look at B, it says permitted signs in all zoning districts must be located on premises to which they apply. And if you go to 6, it's temporary signs, real estate signs.
And election.
And then, and it gets to election. However, those have to be on the property that they apply to. But
That they apply to.
so basically, you could put your election sign on your property.
Right.
You could put a yard sale sign on your property. You
Or how
could put a
about
real
on-
estate sign on your property.
Oh.
That's how this is written.
So-
Now, but
Could I put
but
it
if
on
you,
somebody's property who gives me permission to?
of course,
Oh,
because
okay.
in essence, they're allowing you to put it on
All
their
right, go ahead.
property. Okay. But when we're talking about town property, you have to look at 13327B5, which say signs on the public rights of way, providing information concerning religious services, service clubs, and community organizations. Arguably, if you're putting it, let me just finish. Arguably, if you're putting it out on behalf of, what group are you part of?
It's not a group, it's just a referendum.
No group,
No on Prop 3.
I'm just saying, if you're part of a community organization, that's.
But it's not limited, you can't.
No, wait, I'll give it, yeah, you're absolutely right. So if there's religious services, service clubs, or community organizations, you can ask the town for permission to put it on a public right of way, because this last sentence says, but you're absolutely right with the case law. You gotta be content neutral, not content based. So absolutely you're right, but.
Even Cohn is absolutely wrong about that.
Wait, you'll get a chance.
And you didn't want us to mute him? What the heck?
Okay, so at the end of the day, arguably, you would need permission from the town to put up these particular signs on town property.
You're
On town
absolutely
property.
wrong.
If,
Christina, could you mute him, please?
Yes. No,
Well, then
hold on,
cut him
Kim.
off.
No, Kim, we'll mute your hands.
okay, okay.
I read that provision, okay, and it talks about what religious people have to do, but you cannot allow religious signs and not allow anyone else.
No, I'm just saying what what it says and what the Constitution allows are two different things.
Right, exactly.
So I agree with you on that point. So at the end of the day, the town heretofore hasn't been requesting permission. They allow certain community organizations to put signs in the right of way. Mr. Cohn is saying he placed a sign by another community organization sign, thinking that that would be a legal place to
It
put
wasn't
it.
an organization.
No.
Well, it's
not an organization, let's call it.
I'm a citizen exercising my right to free speech.
Yeah, no. And he feels that he's putting it in a location that is quote unquote legal because there's a sign there all throughout town and there hasn't been an issue with it. So again, at the end, so now you wanted to make another point about the signs.
So I think you'd agree with me that where the signs are placed are perfectly legal because the town has allowed on a consistent basis, people to put tag sale signs, breast cancer signs, yes signs, no signs, Siller for office and.
That's not true. That's 100% not true. No election signs are put on public property.
But you've allowed them to do it for, they're all on the roads.
Not on public property, on people's property.
The width of a road is wider than the road itself.
He's making a point that the right of way, where they put the signs are adjoining their property, but arguably in the town right of way.
They're right in the right of way.
Okay, so let's just move on from that.
So that's point one. I went to the police. They told me what I was doing was going to be fine. And not an expert over there. It wasn't the police chief. I don't want to name the particular officer, but I went there in good faith to talk to the police chief to ask them what can I do and what I can't. I had the code in hand, and there's a municipal guidebook for municipalities, a 78-page PDF that you probably
I've read it.
And there's the case law in there.
No, agreed.
Okay, so we're on the same page, and I don't mean we're arguing on that. So if someone disagreed with that, okay, and maybe thought the law was a different way, okay, the remedy would be to go to the town board or go to the police department and say, hey, I think these are they're on my property or they're not properly placed. What I learned this weekend is that people have been picking up my signs, okay, and I pay for those signs. I don't know what they've done with them, but they're gone. There were 3 witnesses who've seen the person, one of the persons or the only person, I don't know, actually doing it. There are 3 witnesses. They were reported to the police department. And that person, well, The thing that I'm wondering is whether this is the first time you're hearing this.
The first we heard was people complaining that your signs are on public property. Then this weekend, we heard that someone removed some
A
signs.
witness contacted us by
A witness
email.
contacted someone?
By email.
This morning.
Who was the person that the witness say?
No, I'm not going to say that.
Okay, well, I will. It was Chris Diorio. Because I was told by the witnesses it was him, and they spoke to him while he was doing it. Now, Chris Diorio, as you know, is the chairman of the Community Housing Board, which is an appointed position by this town board. And if he had been pulling signs out, right or wrong, okay, and I think he was wrong, and I think that the town attorney and I can come to an agreement after reading a Supreme Court case and whatever, that they were properly placed by me. The charge would be petty larceny. It's a Class A misdemeanor. And besides the fact, you might say, okay, this happens every election year. This is different. This is the chairman of the Community Housing Board picking up opposition signs, something he's been advocating a position, he's in a public position, and I therefore, and you should do it in your own investigation, I'm not asking you not to, okay? But if you've got information that I don't have, because I didn't see anything that people have contacted you, and I'm going to do a Freedom of Information Act request to that effect, which I actually did while I was sitting out there, because I learned this from the police department, okay? So if this is all true, okay, I respectfully request that you demand the resignation or the firing of Chris Diorio as the chairman of the Community Housing Board.
We got an email this morning from Tom Cronin, who witnessed this and said it's going on. We immediately called Chris in for a legal meeting. As soon as we found out about it today, Chris Diorio, because he was the accused.
A legal advice meeting.
Legal advice meeting to talk about this. Chris said he took one sign down. He spoke to Tom about it. He didn't think it was wrong, but he did. And he said rather than hurt the Community Housing Board, he
decided to take a leave of absence pending the review of the matter.
So he will not be involved Saturday. He will not be involved with the Community Housing Board until we have a review. And we'll have to wait for the police to see if charges are filed and what they do.
I have filed charges.
And then we'll go to the,
I will press charges.
and we'll go to the
until this resolution.
Ethics Board and see what he has to do, what they recommend he do.
But in the
Bob Cohen
interim,
is 100% correct on the law.
You mute him?
Hold on a second.
Thanks, Ken, for. So anyway, okay. You should know that the witnesses that I spoke to, and it was 3 witnesses, okay? And I wasn't here to mention any names.
Did the 3 witnesses go to the police?
Yes.
All 3 of them?
Okay, so
Yes.
at this point, there's an
That's them.
investigation that
Yes.
needs to be
Yeah, and I'm
done.
not
We shouldn't be
We're not gonna
speaking.
try
I'm a
to.
college student, so I'm not gonna be,
Yeah, no, we don't want to get into
No,
the
no.
specifics, but just so you know, he's voluntarily taking a leave of absence in his role as chair on the committee and as a member of the committee. And we're going to review this situation. But
My understanding from 2 of the witnesses is that there were multiple of my signs in the guy's truck while they were having this, and they spoke with him while he was doing it.
okay,
That's the
We
fact.
should be trying this.
And
Yeah.
I think the town board might have done something proactively to announce his resignation, that I shouldn't have to come out here. And I don't think it was appropriate for you
He
to.
didn't resign.
Okay.
Yeah, he's taking a
Fine.
leave of absence. We got the
Well,
email just
I haven't changed my
before
position.
this meeting started.
All right, I haven't changed
None of
my,
us had even actually looked at it until
Appreciate
you're
that.
in the middle.
well, I haven't changed my position, but I do think you should resign. But thank you.
Okay.
I'll let Kim speak if he wants. I'll stay for that. Thanks for the trouble.
Kim,
Kim Bombshell.
where'd he go?
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. Everything that Bob Cohen said was correct. There are witnesses to somebody committing a misdemeanor, and that's the person that is at the front of this whole, issue before the town, this affordable housing thing. And the town should take a position about somebody doing something illegal. Just like the town should take a position about somebody on Middle Harbor Road usurping a town landing. But they have been notified about that for 12 years. haven't taken a position. And all I ask of the town board, obey your oath of office, enforce the law, please. Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.
And I just
Thank
want
you. We're not the enforcers.
and I just want to clarify something. I think, Ms. Supervisor, you misspoke. I don't, Chris didn't admit to anything in our conversation. And as you would agree, he's due process and his, right. So we can't, just immediately suspend him or get rid of him because he would have his day, he needs his day in court, right? So in lieu of, he beat us to the punch. Instead of the board suspending him, he voluntarily said, I think this will be a distraction. I'm voluntarily gonna, take a leave of absence until this is sorted out. So I bet you'd agree that he should have that opportunity to.
He's absolutely entitled to due process.
Yes.
And I didn't accuse him, I'm just telling you what people told me. Because I was not a witness.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Let's,
Anybody else?
okay, we're gonna recess the meeting and go into executive session. Chief, you want to stay on?
Contract negotiation.
Contract
Yes.
negotiations.
Second.
I'll second.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks from the end of the room.